Chapter 16. The battle cries outside the main hall had already started to die down. Only the flames were getting bigger and bigger, illuminating the entire imperial city. Shen Yuanqing leisurely strolled in the main hall, walking step by step towards the dragon throne. When he passed by Su Wan, he paused for a moment and then continued to walk forward with a smile. Shen Yuanpo, who was sitting on the dragon throne, looked at the fifth prince that he didn't like. Finally, after a long silence, he slowly opened his mouth. For this position, you want to kill your imperial father. Imperial father? Shen Yuanqing stopped his footsteps and looked at Shen Yuanpo with a face full of ridicule. Since you are ruthless enough to behead me, then why can't I kill you? When you killed me, did you even care about the slightest bit of familial love between father and son? Shen Yuanpo didn't speak, still looking at Shen Yuanqing with a heavy gaze. At this time, he still hoped that someone would come to rescue him. After all, there were still many guards outside the imperial city. Shen Yuanpo didn't believe that with Shen Yuanqing's strength, he could take down the entire imperial city in one fell swoop and not cause any commotion and suspicion outside. Imperial father, why aren't you speaking? What are you waiting for? City guards? Or your imperial secret guards? Speaking to here, Shen Yuanqing suddenly looked at Imperial Steward Enping, who had been guarding Shen Yuanpo's dragon throne. Why don't we let Steward Enping tell you the answer? Enping? Shen Yuanpo's gaze suddenly pierced towards Enping. Enping, who had always been submissive, no longer concealed himself at this time. He quickly walked down the stairs and knelt straight in front of Shen Yuanqing's feet. Your Majesty, this is the Tiger Seal to mobilize the Imperial Secret Guards and the Secret Edict to mobilize the Imperial Secret Guard. Enping, so it was you. At this time, Shen Yuanpo finally knew that he was betrayed by his most trusted confidant. Under his agitated state, Shen Yuanpo's heart was attacked by poison and he suddenly spat out a mouthful of black blood. In the previous life, Shen Yuanqing was also the unpopular fifth prince, but in the end, he still sat on the throne. All this, in addition to his own forbearance and wisdom, he also borrowed a lot of external forces, and the biggest help came from the inside and outside of the imperial cities Enping. In the previous life, at this time, Shen Yuanrui's faction had already fallen, so Yizhihua didn't know that Enping was Shen Yuanqing's people, but regarding this matter, Su Wan was very clear. This was the most common form of betrayal in the imperial city, and it was also the most despairing kind of betrayal. At this time, the atmosphere in the main hall had become even more strange. Shen Yuanqing seemed to be afraid that other people didn't know how cold-blooded he was. He suddenly pulled out a sword from the hands of the Imperial Guard behind him and walked up the stairs step by step. The sharp sword pointed straight at Shen Yuanpo's chest. Shen Yuanpo had been an emperor for many years and had always been high and mighty, good at enjoying life. At this moment, when his life was suddenly threatened, he instinctively began to panic and fear. Qing Imperial Father. Imperial Father can, abdicate, to. The word you hadn't even left his mouth when Shen Yuanqing's sword had already pierced through Shen Yuanpo's body. Since he had already embarked on the path of a renegade, Shen Yuanqing no longer sought to be legitimate. But tonight, he must leave an unerasable mark in everyone's heart. He wanted everyone to be filled with enough reverence towards him. Father, rest in peace. Pulling out the blood-stained sword, Shen Yuanqing was still smiling. Who else? Shen Yuanqing dragged the long sword, blood dripping drop by drop fell under the dragon throne, but he still smiled and looked at everyone in the main hall. Who else wants to accompany the late emperor? Jun will fulfill his wish today. Sure enough, the original male lead was even more domineering. Su Wan tilted her body and took the opportunity to size up Shen Yuanrui, who was in the crowd. At this moment, his complexion was already unsightly beyond description. And the moment Shen Yuanqing's voice fell, there were finally a few figures who couldn't help but rush out from the main hall. One of them was Su Yufeng. Bold renegade. Still not quickly accept your death. Under the leadership of Su Yufeng, a few loyal and patriotic generals actually forcibly suppressed the poison and rushed in front of Shen Yuanqing. Shen Yuanqing merely lifted his sword and lightly swept it, and those generals who were usually aloof all fell to the ground. Seeing their indignant and intolerable expressions, Shen Yuan-Ching kicked Shen Yuan-Po's corpse under the razor dragon chair and sat on the chair as if no one else was present. His gaze ruminatively swept across the audience and finally landed on Su Wan's body. Cousin Su Wan, this poison of yours is really powerful. Su Wan glanced at Shen Yuan-Ching and under everyone's incredulous gaze, she slowly stood up. No matter how powerful the poison is, without Stewardon's help, it is also useless. Xiao Wan. Su Yufeng, who fell to the ground, and Physician Sai, who was sitting not far away, coincidentally called out to Su Wan. The voices of the two men were trembling. Su Yufeng completely didn't dare to believe that his own daughter would collude with the renegade. And Physician Sai's gaze was focused on Su Wan. That kind of complicated gaze was like a silent question and accusation. Right now, what I am holding in my hand is the antidote. Su Wan completely ignored Su Yufeng and Physician Sai's gaze and indifferently looked at everyone present. As long as you are willing to pledge allegiance to His Majesty, you can get the antidote and even get a promotion. If you are not willing to declare your position, then I will also very sincerely send you to the underworld to pledge allegiance to His Majesty. As Su Wan's voice fell, the atmosphere of the entire main hall changed again. Shen Yuan-Ching's palace coup was obviously successful. His Majesty was dead, what else could they do? Continue to be a loyal minister who was not afraid of death, or? In the main hall, some people were moved, some people were hesitant, but no one dared to be the first to speak. You only have the time for half an incense stick to burn to consider. Su Wan waved her hand and An Ping immediately ignited the prepared incense stick. People were forced to come out. Just now, no one was willing to stand out, but seeing that the remaining time was getting less and less, someone finally couldn't bear it and jumped out to pledge allegiance to Shen Yuan-Ching. With the first, there was a second. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the people were already kneeling in the middle of the main hall. And that half an incense stick happened to burn out at this time. Is there anything else? Su Wan once again looked around, her gaze paused on the remaining people. The remaining people, other than Shen Yuan-Ching's brothers and some imperial family members, were the genuine loyal ministers and good generals. It should be these. Su Wan turned her head and looked at Shen Yuan-Ching. Shen Yuan-Ching rushed at her and nodded. You guys missed the last chance. Su Wan whispered to herself, then immediately opened the medicine bottle in her hand and put the antidote into the hands of those people who came to seek refuge. Those officials and their families immediately couldn't wait to thank her and swallowed the antidote. Su Wan's lips finally revealed a trace of a smile, and that smile was seen by Physician Sai, who had been paying attention to her every move. Physician Sai took a deep breath, his face immediately became wonderful. This taste is. After killing Shen Yuan-Po and obtaining the throne, and also subduing half of the ministers, at the moment Shen Yuan-Ching's mood was very good. He smiled as he looked at the group of people in the main hall who refused to admit defeat. Among them were his other brothers. These few people were also smart. They knew that no matter what, he would not let them go. So at this moment, almost everyone's expression was ugly as they sat in the same place, looking face to face with Shen Yuan-Ching. Since you guys are not willing to assist Jin, then Jin can only. Wait a moment. Seeing that Shen Yuan-Ching was about to order the imperial army under his command to make a move, a voice suddenly interrupted him. Physician Sai somewhat swayed as he stood up. Although he was talking to Shen Yuan-Ching, his gaze was always on Su Wan's face. Fifth Prince, can I ask little Junju a question? Shen Yuan-Ching didn't care about Physician Sai's way of addressing him. In fact, he didn't really intend to take Physician Sai's life. Physician Sai was a talented person and was also deeply devoted to Su Wan. This was a person who could be used and had the opportunity to subdue. Sai Daran, please go ahead. Shen Yuan-Ching already guessed what Physician Sai wanted to ask Su Wan. In fact, Shen Yuan-Ching was also very curious. How would Su Wan answer Physician Sai? Would she persuade Physician Sai to be loyal to him? Physician Sai slowly walked in front of Su Wan step by step, looking straight at her eyes. The two people silently looked at each other for a long time. Until he saw Su Wan, who was standing in front of him, lightly rubbing her shoulders because of being motionless for a long time. Physician Sai finally unhurriedly opened his mouth. Xiao Wan, helping the fifth prince to rebel, are you willing? Hearing Physician Sai's words, Su Wan glanced at Physician Sai and subconsciously lowered her eyes to look at Su Yufeng, who was lying on the side with blood on the corner of his mouth. Of course I. Su Wan's voice paused for a moment, then immediately replied in an even louder voice, not willing. Su Wan. Xian Yuanqing, who was sitting on the dragon throne, looked at Su Wan with an unkind gaze. He was pondering over the meaning of Su Wan's words when a large group of elite soldiers suddenly rushed into the main hall and surrounded the people that Xian Yuanqing brought. Xian Yuanqing, you murdered the emperor and killed your father, everyone has the right to punish you. A low and deep voice sounded in the crowd. Immediately after, under everyone's indescribably astonished gaze, the fourth prince, Shen Yuanyi, who had always kept a low profile, calmly stood up. This is... Just when Shen Yuanqing's face was filled with shock, another accident happened in the main hall. Those ministers who had just taken the antidote suddenly had their complexions turn purple and foamed at the mouth. One by one, they fell down. The so-called twists and turns, it was nothing more than this. Physician Sai looked at Su Wan and then looked at the medicine bottle in her hand. What's in here is the highly toxic poison. What I said, is that right? Su Wan non-committally smiled. That's right, what she held in her hand was the poison, and the real antidote was actually mixed by Su Wan into the incense of the incense that had just been burned. Su Wan. Shen Yuanqing looked at Su Wan with widened eyes. Until now, he still couldn't believe that he was actually played by the weak and harmless-looking Su Wan. Meeting Shen Yuanqing's gaze, Su Wan still had an innocent look on her face. Fifth Biao-Ge, you used Su Rui's life to threaten me. I was forced to compromise with you, but I didn't think that you would actually dare to harm His Majesty. You're really too scary. If I had known earlier that you would harm His Majesty, even if I die, I still wouldn't compromise with you. Within a few sentences, Su Wan first stripped herself clean. It didn't matter if other people believed it or not, as long as she believed it herself, it's fine. Sure enough. Hearing Su Wan's words, Shen Yuanqing's heart had already thoroughly turned cold. Su Wan had always been deceiving him, and Su Wan's true partner was actually fourth imperial brother. You're really hiding your strength. Shen Yuanqing looked at Su Wan and then looked at Shen Yuanyi. His originally sharp gaze gradually darkened. I lost, I admit it. The so-called country cannot be without a ruler for a single day. After the entire imperial city was controlled by Shen Yuanyi's troops, those ministers who had survived the calamity also accepted their fate and elected Shen Yuanyi as the new emperor. 3 days later, the new emperor ascended the throne. The traitor Shen Yuanqing and his accomplices were beheaded on the streets. The heads of Shen Yuanqing, Yi Jin and the others were hung on the Meridian Gate to deter thieves and thieves. This time, they really couldn't be more dead. Following the ascension of the new emperor, the entire imperial court underwent the biggest purge and reorganization in history. Not long after, the other princes were separately convicted of different crimes. Some were banished, some were placed under house arrest, and some were even directly executed by the Supreme Court in public. These princes who were condemned naturally included Shen Yuanrui, but his crime didn't warrant death. He was only placed under house arrest in a secluded courtyard of the imperial family. This place was even more desolate and deserted than the cold courtyard that Su Wan once stayed in. The entire courtyard also didn't have anyone to serve him. Other than Shen Yuanrui, there was only Yi Zhihua who was also placed under house arrest. The two people were placed under house arrest in this secluded courtyard. They didn't have luxurious clothes and food, and also didn't have a palace servant to serve them. As time passed, Shen Yuanrui became more and more irritable. Yi Zhihua could only endure it. On the second month of Shen Yuanrui's house arrest, the secluded courtyard welcomed its first visitor. The visitor was an inner servant of the imperial city. He brought over some clothing and exquisite pastries. It was said that the emperor was going to hold the empress conferring ceremony. The whole country would celebrate and specially bestowed these gifts. At first, Shen Yuanrui didn't care about the words of the inner servant. Until before he left, The inner servant handed over a letter personally written by the Empress to Shen Yuan Rui. Only then did Shen Yuan Rui's complexion changed. It turned out that the Empress that Shen Yuan Yi wanted to marry was actually Su Wan. In fact, Shen Yuan Rui was already the last person to know the news. At this time, the entire capital knew that the emperor wanted to marry Su Wan as the empress. The entire Su Fu swept away the haze from the previous days. From top to bottom, the entire Fu glowed with new vitality. Although Su Wan's actions regarding Shen Yuanqing's matter were inappropriate, but now that the dynasty was under Shen Yuan Yi's control, no one dared to use that matter as an excuse. On the contrary, after the reshuffling of the court, Su family's position didn't rise but rose instead. This made everyone see that the emperor was truly biased towards Su Wan Junju. Now that the marriage between the two people was spread, it didn't make too many people surprised. At first, Su Yufeng was brooding over the death of the former emperor. Afterwards, he talked with Shen Yuan Yi in the imperial study a few times and was convinced by the newly appointed emperor. Although he didn't understand why Su Wan gave up physician Sai and chose Shen Yuan Yi, regarding Su Wan's own choice, Su Yufeng had no right to stop it. When physician Sai once again visited the Su Fu, he felt as if a lifetime had passed. It was still that room, it was still that person in front of him, but physician Sai suddenly felt that Su Wan was very far away from him. So far that it was as if she was on the other side of another world. "You came?" Su Wan was very calm towards physician Sai's arrival. "I came today just to ask you." "No need to ask. Never loved." Su Wan coldly interrupted physician Sai's words. Never loved, these three words, she said it very straightforwardly and efficiently. Physician Sai's heart tightened, but his face still carried a gentle smile. "Actually, I wanted to ask." "Don't ask. It's just like what you think. From the beginning, I was together with Fourth Biao and schemed against everyone, including you and Shen Yuanqing." Su Wan once again interrupted physician Sai's words, destroying the last trace of fantasy in his heart. The smile on physician Sai's face finally couldn't hang on anymore. His entire back stiffened. Why? Su Wan seriously looked at physician Sai's face. "Because you're stupid, easy to deceive are deceiving you, only because you're easy to deceive." This was really the best reason. In fact, there was another reason that Su Wan didn't say. She really didn't have a good impression of soft-hearted men like Tom Su. Although physician Sai also sincerely helped her a lot, but if it was another woman, he could still go through water and tread on fire like this, just for the so-called kindness or weakness in his eyes. This kind of overflowing love, Su Wan couldn't accept it. When physician Sai came to Su Fu, he mustered up a lot of courage, but after seeing Su Wan, his entire person was out of his wits, dazed out of his wits. On the day of Su Wan and Shen Yuan Yi's big wedding, all the places in the capital were hung with red ribbons and silk flowers. The festive music even spread to every corner of the capital. Shen Yuan Rui, who lived in the secluded courtyard, also heard that sound and saw the bright red everywhere. He seemed to remember that year when he was high-spirited and vigorous. Also with such fanfare and excitement, he married Su Wan back home. In the blink of an eye, in less than 5 years, she became the empress, but he wasn't the emperor. Everything, where did it go wrong? Su Wan was originally his Wangfei. Now that she became the empress, he should be the emperor, he should be the one to rule the world. In the midst of joy, Shen Yuan Rui's gaze became absent-minded, his face became abnormally painful. Wang Ye. At this time, Yi Jihua, who had just finished preparing breakfast after working hard for the whole morning, came over to call Shen Yuan Rui back to his room to eat. Hearing her voice, Shen Yuan Rui seemed to be greatly stimulated. He suddenly stood up and rushed in front of Yi Jihua, using both his hands to firmly grasp Yi Jihua's neck. "It's you, it's all because of you." Wang Ye. Yi Jihua's originally haggard face quickly turned white, her gaze was fixated on Shen Yuan Rui's face. At this moment, she felt hopeless, felt sad. Breathing became more and more difficult, Yi Jihua's eyes became absent-minded, she seemed to see that spring day in her past life. She was outside a peach blossom forest when she first met the elegant and unrestrained third prince. At that time, her heart was palpitating, She felt that she had found the man of her dreams, but in the end, in her past life, she and Shen Yuan Rui had no fate. She was also harmed and died. In this life, everything started over. She married Shen Yuan Rui as she wished, but now what did she get? Other than a short period of sweetness, what he gave her was more suspicion, coldness, and hurt. Yi Jihua slowly closed her eyes. She began to feel some regret. God loved her so much, giving her a chance to be reborn, but she used everything she had to help Shen Yuan Rui. Really stupid. In her past life, Shen Yuan Rui's skills were already inferior to others. In this life, even if she helped him to deal with Shen Yuan Qing, so what? Wasn't it still the same? They were all beaten into the dust by Shen Yuan Yi. Could it be that God let her be reborn this time, just to let her accept her fate? No, it shouldn't be like this. If it was possible again, she would rather marry Shen Yuan Qing. Carrying this kind of regret, Yi Jihua forever closed her eyes. She didn't know, even if it was a person favored by God, they would always only have that one chance. She would never have a second chance to choose. Yi Jihua died. She was strangled to death by Shen Yuan Rui. Looking at the lifeless corpse at his feet, Shen Yuan Rui's face didn't have any expression. He used his strength to kick the corpse that still had residual warmth, loudly shouted, "Bold slave! Seeing Zhen, why didn't you immediately greet me?" He wouldn't admit that he was a loser. In his heart, he was the winner. Letting a person who saw power and status as everything in life, after losing everything, fall into a state of remorse and madness, this was far more satisfying than directly killing him. At the moment when Yi Jihua died and Shen Yuan Rui went crazy, Su Wan already sat on the Empress Phoenix carriage. Feeling that her mission was successfully completed, Su Wan, who was wearing a red phoenix gown, took one last look at the scenery of the capital and immediately contacted the headquarters in her heart. Mission 003 completed, requesting to return. Requesting to return. Headquarters has received. Information was being transmitted. Every time, the time to return to headquarters was not fixed. Sometimes, the information was transmitted very quickly, leaving this world very quickly. The original owner's body also disappeared because of the dissipation of the soul. Sometimes, the information transmission may be slow for 1 or 2 hours, but the slowest would not exceed 12 hours. Thinking that today was her wedding, Su Wan thought that it would be best for her to directly disappear now, or a bit later, wait until after the ceremony and then disappear from the palace. If she was a bit unlucky and directly disappeared during the ceremony, then really, there was no other way. In the past, after Su Wan finished her mission in the modern world, she would find a safe place and then quietly disappear from the world. But now, she was protected by a group of elite guards. It seemed that wanting to leave was simply a fool's talk. Just when Su Wan was tangled about the time to leave, the troops returning to the imperial city suddenly stopped, followed by a burst of noisy fighting sounds. There was actually someone who dared to stop the Empress Phoenix carriage in the capital. How audacious was that? Extremely daring. Su Wan's heart suddenly shivered. She raised her hand and lifted the curtain in front of her. A corner of the red curtain was lifted and a familiar handsome face immediately fell into Su Wan's eyes. Su Rui. Su Wan was a bit surprised. When she was dressing up in the morning, Su Rui was still lying unconscious in her courtyard. Why did he suddenly? Meeting Su Wan's gaze, Su Rui revealed a strange and sinister smile at her. Then his figure flashed and in the next moment, Su Rui already arrived on Su Wan's phoenix carriage. Quietly staring at Su Wan's red makeup, Su Rui narrowed his eyes. His sinister expression suddenly became gentle. "You look very beautiful wearing these clothes." Hey, he was distracted again. Su Wan looked at Su Rui without batting an eyelid. "You woke up a long time ago?" "No." Su Rui shook his head. If he had woken up a long time ago, then Shen Yuan Yi would definitely not have lived until today. "Then you." "I said before." Su Rui moved closer to Su Wan and interrupted her. "I said before, whoever you want to marry, I will chop that person into pieces and feed them to the dogs. Shen Yuan Yi is no exception." "Then go chop him." Su Wan raised her eyebrows at Su Rui. "You want to lure me away?" Su Rui still stared at Su Wan's face. At that moment, Su Wan suddenly had a feeling of being seen through. How could he? Beep beep. The information transfer was complete. Su Wan's mind already started to ring with the headquarters Ari's voice, now carrying out the soul transfer. Su Wan. Su Rui's eyes suddenly reddened and he crazily pulled Su Wan into his embrace. You're going to leave? You're not allowed to leave. I won't allow you to leave. He felt that she was going to leave. Just like that day, when he felt that she was in danger, he immediately sobered up and instinctively hugged her tightly under his body. Just like today, when he felt that he was going to lose her, the moment the wedding procession left Su Fu, he woke up. Just like now, he felt that she was going to leave, forever leave his life. Su Wan didn't think that the youngster in front of her actually possessed a terrifying and excessive spiritual perception that ordinary people didn't have. He's a good sapling. If she can bring him back to headquarters, TSK. Su Wan felt a bit regretful because right now, her body had already started to become transparent. Su Rui was completely indifferent to the horrifying scene in front of him. He only stubbornly hugged Su Wan until the last part of Su Wan's body disappeared from his embrace. His embrace, empty. He didn't think that she would still have to leave him. As expected of a heartless woman. Su Rui's gaze became darker and darker, so dark that it was somewhat paranoid and crazy. Chapter 17. When the executor opened her eyes in the warehouse, Su Wan didn't get up immediately. Instead, she subconsciously rubbed her shoulders with her hands crossed. It hurt. When she left, Su Rui hugged her and almost went crazy was still vivid in her mind. Su Wan knew very well that if that body didn't disappear, she was afraid that all the bones in her body would be broken by Su Rui. Just like now, she clearly returned to her own body, but the pain of that moment still remained in her soul. Su Wan stood up and dispelled the subconscious pain in her heart. At the same time, she also reminded herself as usual that that world was over and that anyone in that world had nothing to do with her. Over the years, she wandered around various planes and her heart had long been numb. Su Wan was more sober than anyone else. She knew that she wouldn't stay in any spacetime for a long time, so she shouldn't have any feelings that shouldn't exist with people in any spacetime. Including family, friendship, love, those were the most luxurious things for her. Back at her residence, Su Wan comfortably took a bath and changed her clothes, then lay on the big bed that she hadn't slept for a long time. In fact, the time in their lost spacetime was not equivalent to the time in each mission plane. She stayed in the Great Xia dynasty for a few months, but only a day had passed in the lost spacetime. Su Wan, who had enough rest, checked her current points from the communicator on her wrist, 123,400 points. Points were the foundation of her foothold in this spacetime. The ranking of each department was determined according to the accumulated points of the agents, and these points could also be used as currency to buy anything she needed in the lost spacetime. Su Wan picked up a bargain with the 10,000 points this time. She silently calculated the price of the thing she needed. Her face that was originally happy because she obtained 10,000 points immediately collapsed. It seems that if she wanted to buy that thing, her current points could only be considered as a small fraction. It seemed that she needed to work harder to earn points. Thinking of this, Su Wan immediately opened the new mission list of the plane destroyer headquarters in the communicator and inquired about all the missions related to the ex-girlfriend line in the list. In the end, Su Wan still chose the mission with the highest points, the 9th nightmare. This one. She clicked to accept the mission, and then all the information about the 9th nightmare was transmitted to Su Wan's communicator. 003 successfully accepted the mission. Please come to the executor's warehouse within 2 hours for the plane connection. Almost at the same time as Su Wan successfully accepted the mission, the plane restorer headquarters, which was only a kilometer away from the plane destroyer headquarters, also popped up a mission about the 9th nightmare. The 9th nightmare, this was a nightmarish world. The story began with the ordinary college student Yi Zixuan. Yi Zixuan was handsome, but his family conditions were ordinary. After being together with his girlfriend for a year, they broke up because they had different values. After the two broke up, Yi Zixuan suffered a huge blow. In a situation where he lost his mind, he wanted to smash the jade pendant that he had bought for his girlfriend. Who knew that he would accidentally break his own finger? Blood dripped onto the jade pendant, and the magical jade pendant actually attached to his skin. From then on, Yi Zishuan actually had the ability to turn back time. Although this ability could only turn back time by 10 seconds at the beginning, it was still an absolutely amazing ability. Yi Zishuan, who had an ability, began to become an influential figure in the school. He went from being unknown at the beginning to being liked by many girls. Yi Zishuan's ex-girlfriend also didn't expect that her ex-boyfriend would suddenly become so popular. Although she regretted it in her heart, she was also a person with her own principles and insisted on not going back to eat grass. Just like this, after half a year, Yi Zishuan's roommate, a rich second generation, Chen Yufeng, organized a dormitory spring outing in order to pursue the department's flower. There were exactly 9 people who participated in this time's outing. The 9 of them rode in a commercial car to go to a forest park on the outskirts of the city. As a result, they encountered a huge traffic accident on the way and the car could only take a detour. Just like this, they entered the world of the 9th nightmare without any hope. In the first layer of the dream, they had experienced the horror of the wilderness together. In the end, everyone woke up in the car and realized that it was just a dream. But was it really a dream? They didn't know why the road to the spring outing became so far away. Every 2 hours, the people in the car would unconsciously fall asleep and enter the next layer of the dream. In the second layer of the dream, the 9 people were informed by a voice that among the 9 of them, 1 person had died in the first layer of the dream. And now, the 8 people who were alive were in the world of the 9th person's nightmare. That person, Ghost, will go on a killing spree in this world. The dream had one layer after another. Who could enter the 9th layer of the dream alive? Who could escape from the layers of murderous intent? Su Wan. Su Wan. The crisp voice carried a trace of fear, suddenly near and suddenly far. Su Wan slowly opened her eyes and what came into view was a young girl's pale face. Su Wan, you finally woke up. When the young girl saw Su Wan wake up, she nervously and excitedly opened her arms and hugged Su Wan. You really scared me to death just now. Tian. Su Wan looked at the person in front of her with some doubt. The young girl in front of her was wearing a sky blue branded sportswear and carrying a cute little bear backpack on her back. Her name was Fang Tian. She was like her name, a sweet-looking girl. Fang Tian and Su Wan were university classmates and both of them lived in dormitory 503. They were roommates. The dormitory in their university was 4 people per room. The other 2 people in dormitory 503 were called Bai Xiaoyu and Meng Tingyao. Bai Xiaoyu's background was more complicated and her temper wasn't good. Her popularity in the dormitory wasn't good, and Meng Tingyao was the department flower. Not only was she beautiful and had a wealthy background, she was also a famous female top student. In short, Meng Tingyao was the female public enemy. In this kind of environment, Fang Tian and Su Wan became the closest sisters in the dormitory. Tian, what happened to me? Su Wan rubbed the back of her head. I remember that we weren't in the business car. I also don't know. Hearing Su Wan's words, Fang Tian's face became even paler. She had always been timid and liked to follow behind Su Wan no matter what she did. Su Wan, did we run into evil spirits? Fang Tian's voice was especially low. Do you still remember the scene of a car accident that we encountered on the mountain road not long ago? At that time, although the scene was already sealed off and their car was very far away from the scene, Fang Tian still saw a lot of blood flowing on the ground. It was especially terrifying. Tian, don't panic. How can there be such a thing as running into evil spirits in this world? Su Wan pulled a long face and stood up. She discovered that she and Fang Tian were currently in a beautiful mountain forest. According to the original owner's memory, she was still sitting in the car listening to music with Fang Tian a moment ago. As a result, when she woke up again, she was in this strange place. That's right, they actually already broke into the world of the 9th nightmare. And everything in front of Su Wan's eyes told her that she should be in the first layer of the nightmare right now. In this layer, 1 person will die, and that person is. Chapter 18. The 9th Nightmare. This was a world where terror was everywhere. At the same time, it was also the story world where the male lead, Yi Zishuan, killed monsters to level up, and finally won the beauty. In this world, Yi Zishen, who possesses the heaven-defying golden finger skill of time reversal, escaped from death time and time again in his dreams. This also made Meng Ting Yao, who always had her eyes on the top of her head, look at him in a new light. As Yi Zishen's ex-girlfriend, Su Wan was still cannon fodder in this world. It's said that heroes love beauties. Among the 9 people, the most beautiful person was naturally Meng Ting Yao. The beginning of the story was Yi Zishen's roommate, Chen Yufeng, in order to pursue Meng Ting Yao, paid for this spring outing. The 2 dormitories originally had 8 people, but because Chen Yufeng's driving skills weren't good and the others didn't have a driver's license, he asked his childhood friend Chimu to help drive. Chimu and Chen Yufeng were born in a wealthy family and they often played together. Knowing that Chen Yufeng wanted to court the department's flower, Chimu was naturally very happy to join in the fun. As a result, after seeing Meng Ting Yao herself, Chimu also had small thoughts about Meng Ting Yao. However, Chimu was older than Chen Yufeng by 4 years. Now, he was already working in his family's company. Compared to several university students, he naturally knew how to disguise himself. When Chen Yufeng was fawning over Meng Ting Yao, Chimu had a gentle face as he tried to get close to Su Wan. Who let Su Wan's appearance be second only to Meng Ting Yao among the 4 girls? Although the original Su Wan was a bit materialistic and vain, she wasn't a scheming girl. During the journey, she and Fang Tian just happened to sit in the first row behind the driver. So, she chatted pretty well with Chimu along the way. Until the first layer of the dreamland, Su Wan and Fang Tian were trapped in the woods. The first companion they met was also Chimu. After the 3 of them experienced a series of terrifying illusions, they finally met up with the others. It's just that everyone didn't expect that after everyone gathered, the true horror had just descended. In the first dream, a person died. Everyone thought that they were dreaming until the second dream came. Everyone gradually awakened the memories of the previous dream in fear, and they were told to find the real culprit hidden among the crowd. Su Wan, what's wrong? Fang Tian saw that Su Wan was in a daze. The timid her couldn't help but carefully pull Su Wan's sleeves and asked in a low voice. I'm fine. Su Wan hid the complexity in her eyes. The one who died in the first dream was the most timid Fang Tian. The second to die was Su Wan. In fact, at that time, Yi Zishen, who possessed the ability to reverse time, had the opportunity to save Su Wan. But because of his momentary hesitation, after Su Wan died, the second dreamland directly ended and dissipated. Let's go. It's getting dark. We have to meet up with everyone before it gets dark. Towards Fang Tian, who shared the same fate as her, Su Wan's performance was very gentle. Hearing Su Wan's words, Fang Tian nodded and immediately followed behind Su Wan cautiously. Originally, they were here for a spring outing, so it wasn't that difficult for them to run in the forest while wearing sneakers. According to the position of the sun, Su Wan roughly judged the direction and brought Fang Tian all the way to the north. As for this plot, it was only briefly mentioned in the original world's plot files. Who would have the leisure to care about the adventures of 2 cannon fodder? It was also because of this that Su Wan's every move was especially cautious. Because according to her deduction, in the first layer of the dreamland, Fang Tian might have been killed during this period of time. Because there were only the 2 of them during this period of time, the possibility of danger was especially high. Moreover, Su Wan remembered when she woke up, the pain on the back of her head and the dust on her body. In comparison, Fang Tian's body was especially clean and there were no scars on her body. Perhaps, from the beginning, Fang Tian was already dead. This possibility also existed. Thinking that the delicate and pitiful little sister beside her who was tugging at the corner of her clothes might be a female ghost covered in blood with broken hands and feet, Su Wan's back subconsciously straightened. The sun gradually sank in the west. In the quiet forest, there was only the sound of Su Wan and Fang Tian's breathing. The 2 people didn't know how long they walked. This forest seemed to be boundless and they couldn't walk out no matter what. There was only one bottle of water left in her backpack. Fang Tian, who was already weak from head to toe, really couldn't walk anymore. She simply sat under a big tree. Su Wan, I can't walk anymore. Fang Tian's weak voice revealed a trace of despair. Su Wan, we won't be trapped here to death, right? I'm so scared. Don't say inauspicious words. Su Wan also stopped and took out her phone from her pocket to look at it. It was 6:48 in the afternoon. The phone still had 2 bars of battery, but there was still no trace of signal in this place. Tian, we'll stay here first. Su Wan hadn't finished speaking when suddenly, a black shadow appeared out of thin air and fiercely attacked her. Fang Tian, who was sitting on the side, cried out in alarm. In the midst of her scream, Su Wan didn't panic at all and rolled on the ground, easily dodging the black shadow's attack. Fluttering, with a burst of wind, the black shadow quickly flew away. Su Wan, are you all right? The frightened Fang Tian immediately threw herself at Su Wan's side. I'm fine. Su Wan sat up and raised her hand to touch her face. Her brows slightly wrinkled. Ah, you're bleeding. At this time, Fang Tian also discovered a bloodstain on Su Wan's cheek. Was it bitten by that monster? Su Wan, are you all right? Are you poisoned? Su Wan felt speechless. Suddenly, a voice that seemed to be laughing yet not laughing sounded not far in front of the 2 people. How could there be a monster here? Just now, it was only a bat that flew past. The wound on her face should have been caused by rubbing a small stone on the ground and scratching it. The afterglow of the setting sun had long been covered by layers of dense branches and leaves. In this dark and dense forest, a slender and straight figure unhurriedly appeared in the line of sight of the 2 people. Chi Mu's appearance wasn't particularly handsome, but it could be considered a little handsome. Coupled with this decent and generous casual attire and a cynical smile on his face, he had a bit of a yuppie handsome appearance. Big brother Chi. Seeing Chi Mu's figure, Fang Tian's tone changed. After walking for so long, she finally saw a living person. Chi Mu smiled at Fang Tian and immediately walked in front of Su Wan. He gracefully squatted down and looked at her. How did you get yourself into such a sorry state? His tone wasn't considered gentle, but a trace of concern could be heard. It wasn't courteous, but it was enough to attract your attention. It had to be said that when facing girls, Chi Mu was a veteran in the field of love. He was especially skilled in this field. It's just a little broken skin, it won't ruin your appearance. Su Wan carelessly took out a clean tissue and wiped the bloodstains on her face. She raised her hand and subconsciously wanted to throw away the blood-stained tissue. But after hesitating for a bit, she calmly put the tissue into her small bag. Chi Mu had been secretly watching Su Wan. Seeing her small movements, Chi Mu's gaze slightly flashed. In the next moment, he changed into a cynical smile. I didn't meet other people on the way. It's really great to see you too. How about the 3 of us go look for them together? I guess the others should also be in this forest. Hearing Chi Mu's proposal, Fang Tian immediately happily nodded her head. Then she hesitated. This forest is too big. How are we going to look for them? When I came over just now, I saw an open space not far from the northwest. The sky is already dark. Let's go to that open space and light a fire. If other people are nearby and see the fire, they will naturally come to look for us. Big brother Chi, you're so smart. Hearing Chi Mu's proposal, Fang Tian's eyes sparkled as she looked at Chi Mu with a face full of worship. And Su Wan was still expressionless at the side. Light a fire? Chapter 19. Although she already knew in advance who the dead person in the first layer of the dreamland was, Su Wan still didn't dare to have the slightest bit of carelessness. In this world, anything could happen. She could know the plot in advance and use the plot. Then wouldn't other people also be able to? Towards Chi Mu, Su Wan was still as distant as before. This man didn't give her a good feeling. In the original plot, he was also a black-bellied villain. Even half of the 9 people died because of him. That was when the plot progressed to the 5th layer of the dreamland. Chi Mu, who was proficient in calculations, discovered that there was a certain rule in every dreamland and every layer of the dreamland would have a death quota. Yes, no more, no less. Only one. 9 layers of dreamland, 9 people. Only one person could reach the last layer alive. Ever since knowing this hidden rule, Chi Mu, in order to protect himself, began to intentionally or unintentionally mislead and frame others. In the end, he even began to kill his companions. Of course, an unforeseen event occurred when he killed Yi Zixien. Yi Zixien started to go back in time the moment Chi Mu made his move. Afterwards, he, who had the initiative, instead controlled Chi Mu under Chi Mu's lead. The 3 people finally arrived at the open space he mentioned. Looking at the pile of firewood on the edge of the open space, Su Wan suspiciously looked at Chi Mu. Big brother Chi, did you prepare this? Yes, sir. Chi Mu indifferently nodded his head. I originally wanted to check more in the woods, but in the end, I met you guys. But this firewood should be enough. As he spoke, Chi Mu crouched down and took out a lighter from his pocket with ease. Watching him throw the lighter up and spin it a few times, Su Wan couldn't help but roll her eyes. On the other hand, Fang Tian kept following Chi Mu's side without any schemes, looking at him with a face full of worship. The little girl didn't have any schemes, but she was easily confused by appearances. After a while, Chi Mu had already raised the fire. The 3 people surrounded the bonfire. The orange bonfire, in the flickering shadows of the trees in the night, actually made people feel a lot warmer. Even the chill that originally accumulated in their hearts seemed to be gradually dispelled. Fang Tian and Su Wan sat at one end of the bonfire. The 2 people leaned back to back. Not long after, Fang Tian breathed evenly and fell asleep. Su Wan wasn't tired at all. But seeing Chi Mu on the other side quietly observing her and Fang Tian, Su Wan simply closed her eyes. Not long after, she breathed evenly and fell asleep. Seeing that the 2 people were asleep, Chi Mu stared at the bonfire a few more times. Then, he cautiously stood up and turned around to walk into the depths of the forest. After Chi Mu's figure disappeared, Su Wan suddenly opened her eyes. Her eyes were not sleepy at all. It was so late. What was Chi Mu going to do by himself? Why did he wait until she and Fang Tian fell asleep before he left? Su Wan's hand gently landed on her backpack. She opened the zipper and took out the tissue that she used to wipe her face in the evening from a small compartment inside. As expected, staring at the crumpled tissue, Su Wan's face became somewhat unsightly. Su Wan, you're awake? Chi Mu's voice suddenly sounded behind Su Wan. She pretended to be frightened and clenched the paper ball in her hand. Her face was pale as she slowly turned her head. Big brother Chi, you scared me to death. Why did you run behind us? Chi Mu's expression was somewhat awkward. I got up to go to the toilet and then I got lost. Your mother, this place is simply a high-level maze at night. I can't find the way at all. Oh, is that so? Su Wan's face also revealed a trace of awkwardness. Actually, I also want to go to the toilet. Hey. Chi Mu slightly drooped his eyes. Don't go too far. Rest assured, I won't peek at you. As he spoke, Chi Mu returned to the place he was originally sitting and laid down. As if he was afraid that Su Wan would be worried, he simply covered himself with his coat and turned his back towards Su Wan's direction. Su Wan took out her cell phone from her backpack and used the cell phone as a flashlight. She slowly walked into the forest behind her. The forest at night looked like a huge black beast. It was unknown when it would open its bloody mouth. Actually, Su Wan didn't want to solve her physiological problem. She just didn't want to arouse Chi Mu's suspicion. After walking a few steps in the forest, Su Wan stopped and sat on a rock at the side. The cell phone screen was suffused with a faint white light. Su Wan subconsciously looked at the time. It was already 10:50 at night and the cell phone's battery still had 2 bars of electricity. Just as Su Wan was staring at the cell phone screen, the image on her cell phone screen suddenly changed. The ear-piercing ringtone startled Su Wan so much that she almost threw the cell phone away. The ringtone continued, sharp and ear-piercing. The screen showed the caller's name. It was actually Fan Shu Jun. Fan Shu-jun and Yi Zi-xian lived together in male dormitory 503. When Su Wan and Yi Zi-xian were together, she saved his phone number. In the original owner's memory, Fan Shu-jun was an otaku who wasn't good with words. His usual hobby was to hole up in the dormitory and play games. Or he would team up with his roommate Chin Lu and go to the internet cafe to book a room. This was a standard game otaku. At the same time, he was also one of the 9 people on this spring outing. Su Wan's gaze flashed. She saw that her cell phone still didn't have any signal, but the incessantly flashing caller ID told her that everything that happened at this time wasn't an illusion. Hey, Fan Shu-jun? Without time to hesitate, Su Wan immediately answered the phone. Shaw shaw shaw, shaw shaw shaw. A burst of strange rubbing sounds came from the receiver, making people's spines turn cold. Fan Shu-jun, is that you? Su Wan's hand that was holding the cell phone tightened. She couldn't help but ask again. Ninth. A burst of repressed and hoarse male voice intermittently transmitted from the receiver. Su Wan couldn't even determine whether that was Fan Shu-jun's voice or not, but she still couldn't help but ask, what 9th? Fan Shu-jun's face turned red. Meng. Ah. Creak. The voice on the phone started to become strange and creepy. Su Wan still maintained the position of talking, but she felt that Fan Shu-jun's breathing was gradually disappearing. Do. Chapter 20. When Su Wan woke up, her sensitive sense of smell smelled a faintly discernible fragrance. She drowsily lifted her eyelids and saw Chi Mu busily roasting rabbit meat. Fang Tian was still leaning on Su Wan's side. The little girl slept very soundly. You're awake. As if noticing the movement on Su Wan's side, Chi Mu raised his head and glanced at Su Wan. The morning sun shone through the mottled and dense branches and leaves, shining on Chi Mu's side profile. At this moment, this man's smile was as warm as spring. Su Wan's gaze only looked at Chi Mu once and more fell on the branch in his hand. It turns out that you also know how to do this. It's really surprising. A rich and idle person, a pampered hedonistic young master, right now really made people raise their eyebrows. Chi Mu's eyes flashed with a trace of complexity and his face habitually raised a cynical smile. If I can't go out of the hall and into the kitchen, what face do I have to pick up? Girls are. These days, a man who can't cook is not a good husband. As he spoke, Chi Mu tore off a piece of freshly roasted meat and handed it to Su Wan. Ladies first. Don't worry, I washed my hands. Su Wan did not act pretentious and took the barbecue and slowly ate it. In the end, Fang Tian was also attracted by the fragrance and woke up. The 3 people ate to their heart's content and then began to study the next journey. Chi Mu's travel bag was very big and there were some outdoor supplies and a few bottles of water. Although they wouldn't die of thirst or starvation if they kept waiting here, there would be a day when they would be trapped to death. Finally, the 3 people decided to go in a certain direction. Even if they couldn't find other people, at least they had to find the exit out of this forest. The following day was uneventful, but the more tranquil it was, the more uneasy Su Wan became. Until the evening, Fang Tian suddenly seemed to have discovered a new continent and shouted towards a direction. Fang Tian, quickly look. There's a house there. House. Su Wan and Chi Mu coincidentally raised their eyes at the same time. Sure enough, they saw that under the cover of the trees, there was a solitary bamboo building standing there. Bamboo building. Su Wan's complexion changed again. In her memory, the first layer of the dreamland was absolutely not like this. There was also never a bamboo building. Moreover, such a bamboo building. While Su Wan was hesitating, through the dense forest, a few rays of light that weren't too bright suddenly shone over from the bamboo building. Who's there? Is it Su Wan, Tian? A clear and cold male voice slowly came. Hearing this voice, Fang Tian's eyes brightened a bit. Chin Lu. It's me. We're here. Chin Lu is also Yi Zishuan's roommate, and at the same time, Fang Tian has always had a crush on him. Sure enough, not long after Fang Tian's voice fell, the sound of footsteps came from the woods, and then Chin Lu's tall figure appeared in front of the 3 people. He was still wearing the black tracksuit he had worn on the day of departure, and he held a flashlight in his hand. When Qin Lu saw the three figures, he seemed to be greatly relieved. "The three of you are finally back." Su Wn stared blankly and Qi Mu also imperceptibly wrinkled his brows. Only Fang Tian foolishly smiled at Qin Lu for a while, as if she saw a relative. From head to toe, she didn't have that cautious, panicked, and scared appearance that she had during the day. "Go in, everyone's here." As Qin Lu spoke, he took the flashlight and walked towards the direction of the bamboo building. Fang Tian naturally smiled and followed closely behind Qin Lu. Su Wn subconsciously slowed down her footsteps, and Qi Mu also followed her and slowed down. "Do you feel that there's something strange?" Qi Mu leaned against Su Wan's ear and softly whispered. Because Qi Mu was a lot taller than Su Wan, at this moment, he lowered his head and even slightly bent his body. His warm breath constantly lingered beside Su Wan's ear. Su Wan didn't like this overly ambiguous distance, but at this time, she indeed felt that something was wrong. Right now, the four people had already arrived in front of the bamboo building. Su Wan carefully looked at the bamboo building in front of her. The building had 3 floors and looked like it had been built for many years, carrying a sense of vicissitudes. Zixian, Yu Feng, Qi Mu, and the others are back. As soon as he arrived at the door, Qin Lu loudly shouted towards the inside. Creak along with his voice, the door of the bamboo building opened. A youth wearing a grey t-shirt and blue jeans stood at the door, his gaze directly fell on Su Wan. Yi Zixian. At this moment, Su Wan was also looking at Yi Zixian. Yi Zixian's figure was sturdy and well-proportioned. Because he was born in the mountains, his skin wasn't white and was a healthy wheat color. This kind of man matched with delicate and handsome facial features indeed had the capital to move the original owner's heart. But unfortunately, "Since you're back, quickly come in." In the end, it was still Yi Zixian who opened his mouth first. His tone was indifferent and no other emotions could be heard. Chen Yufeng, who was at the side, cooperated and leaned sideways at the door. He also secretly curled his lips at Qi Mu. Everyone knew that Yi Zixian and Su Wan had already broken up for more than half a year. Although the two of them were still single, there was absolutely no possibility of them getting back together. Su Wan stood in the same place and didn't move. Seeing that she didn't understand, Qi Mu also didn't move. Only Fang Tian was still heartlessly following Qin Lu. When they reached the door, she couldn't help but turn her head and look at Su Wan. "Why aren't you guys going in?" As she spoke, Fang Tian's foot already stepped into the bamboo building. "Come back." Su Wan suddenly and fiercely grabbed Fang Tian's arm. In that instant, the bamboo building in front of her started to strangely distort and finally turned into a boundless black hole. Qin Lu, Yi Zixian and Chen Yufeng in front of her all turned into a black fog, but Su Wan was still grabbing Fang Tian's arm tightly. Fang Tian, who had half of her body swallowed by the black fog, suddenly slowly turned her head. That was a badly mutilated face. Her 2 eyeballs fell out of her eye sockets, swaying incessantly on that sinister face. Her red lips that were constantly bleeding opened eerily, revealing a mouthful of sharp white teeth. "Su Wan, I died so miserably, I died so miserably." Fang Tian's hand suddenly turned into sharp white bones and fiercely grabbed towards Su Wan's heart. "Be careful." Qi Mu suddenly bumped over from the side. Borrowing the huge impact force, he knocked away Fang Tian's hand. Qi Mu pulled Su Wan and ran into the woods without looking back. The black fog silently spread in the woods. Wherever it went, all the trees seemed to have a life of their own. All of them bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they attacked Su Wan and Qi Mu. Thick and sharp branches sprang out from all directions, even under their feet. Su Wan only felt that her eyes darkened and her whole body was protected in Qi Mu's embrace. Those knife-like branches instantly pierced through Qi Mu's body, leaving one hideous bloody hole after another on his body. Fresh blood flowed out non-stop like it was free. Su Wan's line of sight was covered by a blood-red color. Qi Mu. After a long time, she finally found her voice. Qi Mu's face was covered in blood, but the corners of his mouth still barely hooked up into a smile that wasn't a smile, although the hero saving the beauty isn't me. Not my style, but if it's you. He hadn't finished speaking when those sharp branches once again covered the sky and covered the earth. Chi-Mu closed his eyes as if he had accepted his fate. Su-Wan's eyes also reddened at this moment. She was tightly hugged in Chi-Mu's embrace. Her hands and feet couldn't move, but this didn't mean that she couldn't do anything. Wake up. Su-Wan suddenly shouted a sentence at Chi-Mu. I told you to wake up. The surrounding was a pitch-black dense forest and the bonfire beside them had already burned to the end. The night wind was very cold, but Chi-Mu woke up from his sleep drenched in cold sweat and saw the scene in front of him. Su-Wan and Fang Tian were still back to back on the other side, breathing deeply. Was it a dream? Chi-Mu subconsciously touched his body. His body was intact and didn't have any wounds. He seemed to have had a nightmare just now, but it was a bit fuzzy, making people unable to remember the scene in the dream. Was it just a dream? Chi-Mu still had some lingering fear in his heart. He couldn't sleep and could only stare at the bonfire that was about to burn out in a daze. Chi-Mu, who was in a daze, didn't notice that Su-Wan, who was on the other side, moved her body without a trace. Her breathing was disorderly for a moment and finally gradually calmed down. In the end, was it a dream? Chapter 21. Chi-Mu didn't sleep the whole time. When the sun rose, his eyes were already bloodshot. When Su-Wan and Fang Tian woke up, Chi-Mu opened his travel bag and took out 2 cans of food and a bag of compressed biscuits. Wow, there's actually canned food. Big brother Chi, you're so well prepared. Do you often go to the wild to play? Fang Tian's eyes sparkled as soon as she saw delicious food. Chi-Mu just smiled. I'm an expert at surviving in the wild. You'll know in the future. A man who doesn't know how to survive in the wild is not a good husband. Su-Wan, Fang Tian. The 3 people hurriedly ate something and then began to discuss how to get out. Chi-Mu forgot about the things in his dream, but Su-Wan still remembered it very clearly. Not knowing what kind of thoughts she had, Su-Wan directly suggested a direction. That was the direction where they met Qin Lu in the dream. The other 2 people didn't object. The 3 people packed up their belongings and resolutely walked in a direction. Just like in a dream, they walked for a day. It was calm and peaceful. The 3 people didn't encounter any danger and didn't find a lost companion. Seeing that the sun was about to set, Fang Tian seemed to be a little anxious. Her eyes were red. Her footsteps were somewhat disorderly, as if she wanted to get out as soon as possible, but there was no way to go. That kind of panic and despair made Fang Tian's complexion extremely pale. Right at this time, a light that wasn't considered bright was suddenly projected from the other side of the jungle. This sudden light caused Fang Tian, who was already in a panic, to cry out. Along with her voice, the light also trembled a bit. Who's there? Get out here for this old woman. The girl who was full of energy had the air of a ruffian. This voice is by Xiao Yu. Fang Tian's voice carried a sobbing tone. But at this moment, her mood was really excited because she recognized this voice. This was the voice of her roommate, Bai Xiao Yu. Hearing Bai Xiao Yu's voice, Su-Wan was also a bit surprised. When she chose this direction, she really just wanted to try her luck. Didn't expect that she would actually encounter a companion here. Not long after, Bai Xiao Yu appeared in front of the 3 people. She had dyed her long dark purple hair and she was also wearing black tights. Her wrists were adorned with strings of exaggerated jewelry. This outfit was so dazzling that Su-Wan didn't dare to look at it. Bai Xiao Yu was born in a society. Her father was the leader of a large local society. Everyone called him Boss Bai. Boss Bai had a daughter when he was old. In this life, he only had Bai Xiao Yu, this one precious daughter. It could be imagined that Bai Xiao Yu grew up under Boss Bai's extreme doting. But she was clearly a fair and cute little girl, but somehow, she grew up crooked and became like this. Su-Wan felt that Boss Bai must be the most vexed person. Bai Xiao Wan was the 3. Bai Xiao Yu saw the figures of the three of them and stared at Chi Mu meaningfully. Only then did she open her mouth to ask. I met him on the way. Su Wan was the first to answer. Bai Xiao Yu, are you alone here? When Bai Xiao Yu heard Su Wan's question, she subconsciously looked at Chi Mu. After a moment of silence, she answered in a low voice, only myself. Don't worry, the four of us will travel together in the future. We'll definitely find them. Fang Tian, who had already returned to normal, immediately took a step forward. As she spoke, she raised her hand to pat Bai Xiao Yu's shoulder. The moment Fang Tian's hand came into contact with Bai Xiao Yu's shoulder, the flesh and blood on her hand instantly dissipated, leaving only white and sharp knuckles. Without hesitation, she pierced into Bai Xiao Yu's shoulder. In the blink of an eye, black blood splattered onto the ground, causing the grass and wildflowers on the ground to wither in an instant. Let's go. Fang Tian's arms and even her upper body were constantly changing. Her flesh and blood were disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Even so, the white skeleton that had lost its flesh and blood still turned around with difficulty. The skeleton made an unpleasant sound of friction. As the teeth closed and closed, a dark and unpleasant voice came out of its mouth, hurry up and go. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Su Wan looked on helplessly as Fang Tian turned into a skeleton. She looked on helplessly as a large amount of black blood gushed out from Bai Xiao Yu's body. Her dark purple hair grew longer and longer. The crazy long hair covered her face and even covered her whole body. Those long hair fluttered in the air. First, it wrapped around Fang Tian's skeleton. Then, it rushed towards Su Wan and Chi Mu's direction. Go. This time, Su Wan's hands were quick. She pulled Chi Mu and turned around to run. Chi Mu usually liked to survive in the wild. His physical strength was naturally very good. But, he didn't expect that Su Wan's physical strength was also this good. The two of them ran all the way and she was actually able to keep up with his speed. What the hell is going on here? While running, Chi Mu couldn't help but mutter to himself, Fang Tian and Bai Xiao Yu wouldn't have been possessed by ghosts, right? Thinking about the situation just now, Chi Mu still felt his scalp tingle. Su Wan didn't speak and didn't look back. She just ran all the way until a ghostly shadow blocked their way. There was no moonlight or stars in the dense forest. The surroundings were pitch black. They could only hear Su Wan and Chi Mu's violent gasps. That shadow stood silently under the tree, blending into one with the night. It carried a chill that made people's hearts palpitate. Dark purple hair wildly danced in the night and jet black blood dyed her body. The existence in front of them was no longer Bai Xiao Yu. Instead, it was a female ghost without a face and her hair wildly danced. The female ghost stood fixedly not far from Su Wan and Chi Mu. Those strange strands of hair danced like a turbulent undercurrent, pouncing on the two people's faces. This moment came suddenly, but Su Wan's gaze congealed. At the juncture of life and death, she suddenly pushed Chi Mu, who was beside her, away. I don't like to owe other people favors. Her voice hadn't fallen when Su Wan suddenly opened her eyes. The early morning wind carried a trace of coolness. Beside them was the bonfire that had long been extinguished. The sky was cold and the dew was heavy. Su Wan subconsciously shrunk her body. Fang Tian, who had been leaning on her, slowly woke up because of Su Wan's movements in the room. Morning. Fang Tian was still in a daze. She subconsciously moved her stiff and numb limbs and couldn't help but complain, it's so cold. If there was a tent, it would be good. Speaking up to here, her stomach suddenly made a gu sound. This made the always lively and cheerful Fang Tian couldn't help but blush, a bit hungry. Su Wan, what do you want to eat? I also have a bag of biscuits in my backpack. Eat canned food. Su Wan stood up and walked over the bonfire, directly arriving in front of Chi Mu. Chi Mu was still sleeping very deeply. His eyes were tightly closed and his complexion wasn't very good. Su Wan went around to Chi Mu's back and opened his backpack. She took out 2 cans of canned food from inside. Sure enough, even the taste and brand of the canned food was exactly the same as in her dream. Wow! There's actually canned food. Fang Tian couldn't help but be speechless. This Chi Dade's preparations are really complete. One look and you can tell that he's an expert in surviving in the wild. Speaking of which. Fang Tian didn't know what to think and suddenly turned her face to look at Su Wn. Su Wn, how did you know that there are canned food in his backpack? I inadvertently saw it. Su Wan casually replied. Fang Tian glanced at Su Wn and then glanced at the soundly asleep Chi Mu. Minding her own business, she muttered something and turned around to fight with the canned food that Su Wn handed to her. When the two people were almost done eating, Chi Mu sat up dripping with sweat. You're awake. Su Wan, who had been distracted paying attention to Chi Mu's movements, immediately asked a question. Chapter 22. Is the dream constantly overlapping, or have we always been in a dream? Su Wan clearly knew that she was in the ninth nightmare's world, but everything in this world was completely different from the world she originally knew. Unknowingly, everything deviated from the original track. Unknowingly, who was controlling everything? Chi Mu's mental state wasn't very good after he woke up this time. Su Wan already understood a lot of things from the way he looked at her and Fang Tian. He must remember that dream. After a simple breakfast, the three people began to discuss their next itinerary. Chi Mu began to be absent-minded and Fang Tian never had her own opinions. We're not going anywhere. Finally, it was Su Wan who made the final decision. We'll wait here. If they are really in this forest, they will definitely find us. Yes, in fact, Su Wan had already made up her mind. This time, she wouldn't take the initiative to attack. She would wait for the rabbit to come to her. Hearing Su Wan's words, Fang Tian nodded her head. Chi Mu only looked at Su Wan thoughtfully and didn't oppose in the end. Waiting was the most unbearable thing. Time seemed to be extended infinitely at this time. This day, it seemed to be especially slow. With great difficulty, it was night time. Fang Tian habitually leaned on Su Wan's side, wanting to absorb some warmth. And Chi Mu, whose eyes were blue and obviously lacked sleep, kept staring blankly at the bonfire. Why aren't you sleeping? Su Wan used a small branch to fiddle with the bonfire. She raised her eyes and curiously looked at Chi Mu. Chi Mu opened his mouth. He didn't dare to sleep. He was afraid that once he fell asleep, he would fall into a nightmare again. That kind of feeling was too terrifying. Su Wan, do you believe that in this world, there are ghosts? Chi Mu thought for a long time and finally couldn't help but ask Su Wan. Ghosts? Su Wan pursed her lips. Not knowing what she was thinking, she somewhat unconcernedly replied, even if there are ghosts, so what? Will they be scarier than people? Su Wan always felt that the most terrifying, most frightening, and most vicious thing in this world was always the human heart. Regarding this point, no one was clearer than her. Su Wan's mood inexplicably became somewhat gloomy. It seemed that she accidentally recalled some memories that should have been forgotten. She forced herself to take a few deep breaths. Her gaze and mind once again settled down. Chi Mu, who was at the side, began to stare blankly after hearing Su Wan's answer. The silence between the two continued to spread. Time ticked by. Su Wan couldn't sleep either. She was waiting for the prologue of the night, or perhaps waiting for a chance to end it. Unknowingly, it was already deep into the night. There was a slightly cold mountain breeze blowing through the forest. Su Wan subconsciously shrunk her body. Chi Mu, who was at the side, was still holding on. Seeing him holding his phone and continuously playing games there, Su Wan simply turned her body and looked at the other side. Fuck. Right at this time, Chi Mu, who was behind him, suddenly angrily threw his cell phone. After enduring for so long, it's still not 11 o'clock. The night is long, how am I supposed to get through it? Su Wan turned around and her gaze fell on Chi Mu. Did I disturb you? Perhaps the successive nightmares made Chi Mu irritable, but in front of a beauty, he still maintained his elegant image. I'm fine. Su Wan's gaze moved and directly fell on Chi Mu's phone screen. What time is it? She asked subconsciously. 10:50. Chi Mu weakly replied, completely not noticing Su Wan's surprised expression that was not far away. Right at this time, the sound of messy footsteps suddenly came from the forest. Su Wan and Chi Mu looked at each other and both of them held their breath. Chi Mu even took out a small military knife from the backpack beside him. As for the two figures that suddenly appeared, they seemed to have seen the fire here and stumbled out of the dense forest. "It's you guys." When Su Wan saw the faces of those two people, she didn't know if she should breathe a sigh of relief or be more cautious. That's right, these two people were Meng Ting Yarrow and Fan Shujun. In the previous two dreams, Su Wan had already seen the other four people. Su Wan also guessed that she would see Fan Shujun and Meng Ting Yarrow this time, but the way they met was a bit different from what she thought. Right now, Meng Ting Yarrow was being supported by Fan Shujun. One of her legs was still seeping with bloodstains. Although she cut a sorry figure, Meng Ting Yarrow deserved to be called a flower on a high mountain. Even if she had fallen to this point, she still maintained her charming elegance. At this time, seeing the bonfire in front of her, as well as Su Wan and Chi Mu, Meng Ting Yarrow's pair of good-looking eyes somewhat astonished fell on Su Wan and Chi Mu. "I didn't think that you two would be together." Hearing Meng Ting Yarrow's words, Su Wan's heart shivered. Chi Mu's expression also greatly changed as he looked behind Su Wan. Over there, it was empty. Fang Tian, who was leaning on Su Wan and sleeping soundly, actually disappeared into thin air. What's wrong? Perhaps it was because Su Wan and Chi Mu's expressions were too unsightly at the moment. Meng Ting Yarrow also subconsciously looked behind Su Wan and thoughtfully asked, "Is there something wrong?" Fang Tian. Chi Mu took a deep breath and somewhat trembled as he said this name. "She has always been with us. Just a moment ago, she was still here." Fang Tian. Meng Ting Yarrow wrinkled her brows. Fan Shujun, who had been supporting her at the side, suddenly spoke in a low voice with some uncertainty. "Did you see Fang Tian wearing blue sportswear?" "How did you know?" Su Wan and Chi Mu happened to look at Fan Shujun at the same time. Fan Shujun, who was originally very embarrassed because he was supporting Meng Ting Yarrow, after hearing the two people's question, his expression became even more embarrassed. "That actually is." Fan Shujun subconsciously used one hand to push up the glasses on the bridge of his nose. "Don't you guys feel that this place is very strange?" "Nonsense. You changing the topic like this is also very stiff. Don't you feel it?" Although it didn't match with her own persona, at this moment, Su Wan really wanted to roll her eyes. However, Fan Shujun's following words made Su Wan hold her breath. "I don't know if you guys have played the game Second World. The protagonist of this game can wander between two parallel universes at will and simultaneously live two different lives. At that time, he thought that he had the superpower to cross space, but in reality, he has always been living in an overlapping dream world. That world is called the Second World. In the Second World, everyone has the right to control their own dream world. In that world, they can do as they please and realize all of their wishes and dreams. You're not trying to say that we're in that wonderful second world, right? Really seeing a ghost?" Chi Mu's voice was somewhat hoarse, but there was even more anxiety. If it's really a dream world that you can control at will, that would be great. God knows what he dreamt of. The experience of being chased by a female ghost was simply too horrifying, okay? Actually, I'm just making an analogy. Hearing Chi Mu's words, Fan Shujun somewhat bashfully lowered his eyes. And Su Wan deeply looked at Fan Shujun. She thought of that phone call from Fan Shujun. On the phone, he kept saying the ninth. What did the ninth represent? What did he want to express in the end? And the words he didn't finish saying, that Meng word, did it represent Meng Ting Yarrow? Did you guys also encounter strange things? Su Wan suddenly looked at Meng Ting Yarrow and asked with an incomparably serious expression. Meng Ting Yarrow's gaze slightly flickered. At this time, you must tell the truth. Su Wan couldn't help but add a sentence. Meng Ting Yarrow hesitated for a moment. Finally, she slowly sat beside the bonfire. The light of the fire reflected on her fair and delicate face. At this moment, Meng Ting Yarrow's complexion seemed somewhat pale. Before I met Fan Shujun, I was always alone in the woods. Seemingly thinking of something, Meng Ting Yarrow subconsciously bit her lips. Later, I met Qin Lu and Bai Xiao Yu one after another, but they. What happened to them? Qi Mu, who was at the side, began to question closely. It was very obvious that he also felt that perhaps Meng Ting Yarrow also encountered a similar situation as him. They all died. Chapter 23. They're all dead. Su Wan said this sentence with absolute certainty. The three people at the side all happened to look at Su Wan at the same time. Su Wan, did you also dream? Qi Mu suddenly stared at Su Wan and asked somewhat eagerly. Yes, I also had a strange dream. Also. Su Wan's gaze flashed past the three people. If I didn't guess wrong, right now, we're still in a dream. Layer after layer of dreams. When we wake up from the dream, we think we're awake. In fact, we've just passed from a layer of dreams to a deeper layer of dreams. This was the truly terrifying part of a nightmare. It will make you live forever in the dream, unable to escape and unable to return. How is this possible? Qi Mu, who was the oldest and had the most experience, was the first to lose his cool. Perhaps, to him, this statement was really too fantastical, making it hard for him to accept. In contrast, Meng Ting Yarrow was much calmer. She knitted her brows and still had an aloof appearance. Fan Shu-jun, on the other hand, raised his eyes and glanced at Su Wan. The eyes behind the lenses flashed with an unknown radiance. Dream world? Is it like the existence of Inception? Then, is there also a node that can connect to reality? Fan Shu-jun asked several questions in a row. His tone faintly carried a trace of excitement. That's why it's said that the mind of a game geek, ordinary people simply can't understand. However, Su Wan was very concerned about Fan Shu-jun. This geek was absolutely not simple. That's right, this node that connects to reality does exist. Su Wan took out her cell phone from her bag and shook it in front of everyone. My cell phone's time has always stopped at 10:50 p.m. I think I can roughly know when I was pulled into this endless loop of dreams. It was that 10:50 p.m. call from Fan Shu-jun. After the phone call was hung up, Su Wan was pulled into this layer of dreams. That node, what is it? Meng Ting Yarrow, who had been silent all this time, finally set her gaze on Su Wan. Her gaze carried a trace of inquiry and also some suspicion. I don't know. Su Wan shook her head. Perhaps, we should first find Yi Xian and Chen Yufeng. This way, we might be able to find a way to return to reality. Hearing Su Wan's words, Meng Ting Yarrow's gaze flashed. How do you know that Yi Xian and Chen Yufeng are still alive? If Fang Tian and the others died, then Yi Xian and the others might also have died. Even the Su Wan and Qi Mu in front of them. Meng Ting Yarrow only felt chills all over her body. She didn't dare to continue thinking. Yi Zishuan won't die. Su Wan said resolutely and decisively. As this world's #1 male lead, how could Yi Zishen die so easily? You're quite confident in him. Regarding Su Wan and Yi Zishen's relationship, Meng Ting Yarrow was also very clear. The two people's breakup couldn't be said who was right and who was wrong. Su Wan was born in the city and wanted to pursue the life she wanted, while Yi Zishen came from the mountains and wholeheartedly wanted to achieve success and repay his fellow villagers in the mountains. The two people's dreams were diametrically opposed. At that time, they were so affectionate and sweet together, but it was just normal opposites attracting each other. Although Meng Ting Yarrow and Su Wan had always been living in the same dormitory, they didn't interact much with each other. She didn't really understand Su Wan's character. Right now, she was even more doubtful of her. This night, the four people sat around the bonfire and took turns to rest. The night passed without anything happening. The next day, the few people still discussed that they still had to wait by the tree stump for a hare. They waited in the same place. Unfortunately, this wait lasted for 3 days. Although nothing strange happened in these 3 days, Yi Zishen and Chen Yufeng's figures still didn't appear. At this time, the four people didn't have much food and water left. Tomorrow, we'll go find them. In the deep night, Qi Mu's voice was particularly tired, continuing like this isn't a solution. We can only do this. Meng Ting Yarrow looked at Chi Mu and then looked at Su Wan. Su Wan also faintly nodded. As for Fan Shu-jun, who had the lowest sense of existence at the side, he kept his head down and minding his own business playing games. It was as if the place he was in right now wasn't a strange mountain forest, but a big bed in the dormitory. Just like the past few days, everyone took turns to rest. When it was Su Wan's turn to be on night duty, she saw that Fan Shu-jun still hadn't slept. But this time, he didn't play games. Instead, he stared blankly at the night sky that was covered by the leaves. What are you thinking about? Su Wan quietly sat next to Fan Shu-jun and seriously looked at him. Right now, Fan Shu-jun took off his thick glasses. This was also the first time Su Wan sized up Fan Shu-jun's appearance. Actually, his eyes were very good. Because he didn't go out for a long time, Fan Shu-jun's skin was also very white. His handsome facial features matched with his slightly pale skin. He didn't look like a dead otaku at all. Not thinking about anything. Bored, in a daze. Fan Shu-jun turned his face and looked at Su Wan with misty eyes. Su Wan knew that right now, Fan Shu-jun couldn't see her expression clearly. Because he was highly myopic, when he didn't wear glasses, his gaze was misty. Did you dream of Fang Tian? Even if she knew that Fan Shu-jun couldn't see her gaze, Su Wan still habitually stared at Fan Shu-jun's eyes. Hesitating, Fan Shu-jun still nodded his head. I dreamed of her. In the dream, Fang Tian wore a set of blue sportswear. Fan Shu-jun gently closed his eyes, as if he was recalling something. Blue clothes. Su Wan wrinkled her brows. This wasn't the first time Fan Shu-jun mentioned that set of clothes. Fang Tian never wears blue clothes. Perhaps it was because he closed his eyes, or perhaps it was because he was too tired, but Fan Shu-jun's voice began to become very low and weak. She said that she likes blue, but blue doesn't match her skin color. So, in her own wardrobe, there's no objection that the clothes are blue. Because he cared too much about a person, he could always remember every word she said in his heart. Even in a dream, he couldn't forget it. Fang Tian, who liked blue but was never willing to wear blue. When she appeared in front of him wearing a set of blue sportswear, Fan Shu-jun knew that he was dreaming. So it turned out that Fan Shu-jun liked Fang Tian. Su Wan couldn't help but understand. If it was in reality, this damn otaku wouldn't have revealed this secret no matter what, right? Because this was in a dream, so Su Wan's eyes suddenly brightened. What is a dream? How does a nightmare control a dream? It can make everyone fall into a nightmare that it weaves and be unable to escape, but it can't control people's innermost selves. Just like Fang Tian. She clearly liked blue and was unwilling to wear it because she loved her beauty. But in her dream, she had self-awareness and she wore blue clothes. Just like Chi Mu. In reality, he was a swift and decisive company executive and was also a hedonistic young master who showed mercy everywhere. But in the dream, he was more impatient and fearful than anyone else. And what was unexpected was that he actually had the side of a good family man. Another example was Fan Shu-jun, an introverted and silent otaku. In this world, he was more sensitive and clear-headed than anyone else. But if in this world, everyone could reflect their innermost selves, then where was Yi Shen right now? What was he doing? Su Wan thought of that bamboo building again. In a certain layer of the dream, she saw that bamboo building. That bamboo building made her feel strange, but also very familiar. Thinking about it now, wasn't that the bamboo building that Yi Shen drew for her in the original owner's memory? So, the existence of the bamboo building, the appearance of Yi Shen, was that also a reflection of Su Wan's innermost feelings? The original owner actually couldn't let go of that feeling. There was also Fang Tian. If the bamboo building was the original owner's longing for Yi Shen, then Fang Tian was the reflection of Su Wan's innermost feelings. From the moment she woke up, she was schemed against. Su Wan still remembered that the first person she saw after waking up was Fang Tian. She naturally thought that she was in the first layer of the dream and Fang Tian would be the first to die. So in the subsequent layers of the dream, Fang Tian continuously turned into a skeleton in front of Su Wan. Everything was because her heart had long since determined that Fang Tian would die. That's why she had that kind of dream. Then, what if she was replaced with Yi Zixuan? Su Wan slowly closed her eyes. She imagined Yi Zixuan's encounter in the dream when Yi Zixuan realized that he had suddenly and inexplicably appeared in a strange mountain forest. What would he do? Su Wan's mind slowly outlined Yi Zixuan's face. He stood in the dark forest without a single soul. First, he had a look of shock on his face. Then, Yi Zixuan would unhesitatingly activate his ability, Time Reversal. It was Time Reversal. With Yi Zixuan's personality, he wouldn't passively take a beating. He would activate his ability at the first moment and return to the past. Then, he would make a move after making a plan. So, Yi Zixuan wouldn't appear here. In the nightmare of this mountain forest, Yi Zixuan's figure wouldn't appear. Truly regretful. Su Wan sighed softly. Since there was no way to meet Yi Zixuan here, then what was the point of staying here? It's time for me to wake up. Su Wan closed her eyes at ease. When she opened her eyes again, she saw snow-white walls and sky-blue curtains. Here was the city's affiliated hospital's single-patient ward. Su Wan's forehead was a bit painful. She gently lifted her hand and discovered that her forehead was wrapped in layers of bandages. It seemed like she was injured. It was a bit painful. Su Wan suddenly smiled. She knew that she came out. She came out of her own dreamland. But, she didn't know whose dreamland she entered this time. That's right. The layers and layers of dreamland in the wilderness were actually Su Wan's own dreamland. From the time she was attacked by the bats in the forest, Su Wan felt a trace of strangeness. She left behind the tissue that she used to wipe her blood. Later, she discovered that there wasn't a trace of blood on the tissue. Then, she encountered danger in the deeper layer of the dreamland and was saved by Chi Mu. At the last critical moment, Su Wan thought of letting Chi Mu wake up. As a result, Chi Mu really woke up. Nightmares were omnipresent and pervasive. But there was a major premise that they could only sneak into other people's dreams and do whatever they wanted in other people's dreams. From that time on, Su Wan knew that she had been schemed against by the nightmare from the moment she entered this world. Chapter 24. You group of youngsters are really lucky. The nearly 40-year-old head nurse couldn't help but mutter while changing Su Wan's dressing. That mountain road often collapses. On the day you guys had an accident, another place also collapsed. Those people weren't so lucky. A few people died in the car. This matter was reported in the newspaper. It said that the $1 million luxury car was also scrapped. It's really a pity. Mountain road, car accident. Su Wan slowly closed her eyes. In her memory was the scene of sitting in the business car that day. When they were halfway, there was a huge car accident in front of them. The road was blocked. Chi Mu had no choice but to turn around and take another small road. Afterwards, it turned out that there was a car accident. No wonder her head hurt so much and her memory was so vague. Don't know how the others are. Yi Zixuan, head nurse. Su Wan thought of this and immediately called out to the head nurse who was about to leave, "My classmates, the companions who were in the same car as me. Are they all right?" "Oh, you ask them. 2 of them only had scratches. This morning, they were taken out of the hospital by their family members. There are 4 people with similar injuries to you who still need to stay in the hospital for observation. The remaining 2 with more serious injuries are still unconscious in the intensive care unit. But after tonight, there shouldn't be any danger to their lives." Finished speaking, the head nurse turned around and quickly left. Su Wan struggled to get up and wore the slippers on the ground and slowly walked out of her ward. She kept inquiring along the way and finally successfully arrived outside Yi Zixuan's ward. Through the small window at the door of the ward, she could see the scene inside. Yi Zixuan didn't stay in a single ward. The person who stayed with him was Qin Lu. Right now, the 2 people were sitting on the bed, their bodies facing each other as if they were chatting. Su Wan looked at the bandage on Yi Zixuan's arm. Seeing that he didn't have any major problems, she finally relaxed. She hesitated and was about to leave when Yi Xian suddenly felt something and looked towards the door. The two people's gazes unexpectedly met. Seeing that Yi Xian was stunned, Su Wan awkwardly pushed the door and entered. Su Wan? Qin Lu looked at Su Wan and then glanced at Yi Xian on the other bed. You came to see us? En. Su Wan responded in a low voice. Are you two all right? I'm fine. Qin Lu laughed heartily. We only suffered minor injuries, it's not a big deal. How are you? I'm fine too. It's just that my head hurts sometimes. Su Wan gently rubbed her forehead. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I can't remember it no matter what. Every time she had a headache, she would be in so much pain that her consciousness would become fuzzy. When the pain passed, she would feel uncomfortable all over. She always felt that she was missing something important in her memory, but she just couldn't remember it. Did he hit his head in the car accident? You have to check it carefully. Qin Lu saw that Su Wan seemed to have a worried expression and couldn't help but remind her. I will. Su Wan nodded and seemed to have thought of something. She couldn't help but ask, Qin Lu, I heard from the head nurse that there is still someone who hasn't woken up in the intensive care unit. Who is it? It's Chen Yufeng and Bai Xiao Yu. Speaking of this matter, Qin Lu's complexion wasn't very good. At that time, the two of them were sitting at the furthest back, and according to those doctors, at that time, the rock that fell from the mountain just happened to hit the rear of our car. So that's how it was. Su Wan carefully recalled everyone's seats at that time. Qi Mu sat in the driver's seat at the very front and Fan Shujun sat in the front passenger seat. When they just got on the car, the two people seemed to have discussed a lot about playing games. Behind Qi Mu was herself and Fang Tian. On Fang Tian's right was Meng Tingyao. In the back row sat Yi Xian, Fan Shujun and Chen Yufeng. Bai Xiao Yu, who always didn't get along, sat alone in the last row. On the road, Su Wan had been listening to songs with Fang Tian. Later, Qi Mu took the initiative to look for her to chat, so she chatted with him from time to time. She never looked back to look at the scene behind her. According to what Qin Lu said, when the accident happened, Chen Yufeng and Bai Xiao Yu were sitting together. Perhaps at that time, Chen Yufeng just happened to run to the back and had something to talk to Bai Xiao Yu about. Then he was really quite unlucky. After leaving Qin Lu and Yi Xian's ward, Su Wan asked around again. Afterwards, she found Fang Tian and Meng Tingyao's ward to take a look. The two people also didn't have any major problems. Fang Tian was still the same as before, timid and talkative. She pulled Su Wan and talked endlessly. Between her words, she always thought that she was very secretive about Qin Lu's injuries. Actually, Fang Tian liked Qin Lu. This wasn't any secret. Only Fang Tian thought that she hid her feelings very well. Only Qin Lu was so slow that he couldn't see through her thoughts. Su Wan also went to look at Meng Tingyao. The relationship between the two people was ordinary. Meng Tingyao wasn't a talkative person. She had always been like a goddess high above. Su Wan felt that this kind of person was never in the same world as her. Just like this hospitalization, everyone stayed in the ordinary ward. Although Meng Tingyao also had a minor injury, she stayed in the VIP room on the 5th floor and there was also a special nurse to take care of her. Although the teacher said that everyone was equal, Su Wan felt that people were divided into 3, 6, and 9 grades from birth. This isn't something you can choose yourself. Just like her, just like Yi Xian, just like people like Meng Tingyao and Chen Yufeng. Chen Yufeng and the others were born with a golden spoon in their mouths. Their lives were superior and they didn't have to worry about food and clothing. But Yi Xian was poor since childhood and had no choice but to rely on himself. As for Su Wan herself, she was born in an ordinary worker's family. Although she wasn't as poor as Yi Xian, she was always very clear about the hardships of her parents' work. So half a year ago, when Yi Xian suddenly said that he wanted to bring her back to that small mountain village after graduation, Su Wan refused. She didn't want to suffer, but more than that, she didn't want her parents to continue suffering. Say that she was materialistic or vain, she always rationally believed that love wasn't everything in life. She wanted to live a better life. She pursued a better living environment for herself and her family. What's wrong with this? Returning to her own ward, Sue Wan was very tired. When she closed her eyes, she could always recall everything in the past. She lightly sighed some feelings. The past is the past. Unknowingly, Sue Wan's breathing evened out and she fell asleep. The ward was gloomy. The blue curtains of the window suddenly shook violently at an unknown time, as if it was forcefully pulled to both sides. As the curtains were pulled, you could see the clean window and the moonlight outside. Chapter 25. Sue Wan only stayed in the hospital for 3 days. After that, she was picked up by her parents and discharged from the hospital. The originally planned Labor Day holiday was inexplicably ruined. Fortunately, there were still 3 days for her to rest at home. Xiao Wan, Mom and Dad are leaving. You lock the door and sleep early tonight. Her mother's warning came from the living room and then Sue Wan heard the sound of the door closing. For a lot of people, the Labor Day holiday was a very hard day for Sue Wan's parents. They were busy working overtime and selling goods in the factory. So it can be said that real working people, where would they have the leisure time to celebrate Labor Day? As usual, Sue Wan locked the door and then changed into her pajamas to watch entertainment programs for a while. At 9 o'clock sharp, she returned to her room to sleep. Sue family's house was a 1.5 bedroom. Sue Wan's father and mother naturally lived in the big bedroom. Sue Wan's room was very small. In addition to a single bed, there was also a 1.2-meter wardrobe and a 2-tiered multipurpose study table. Right now, Sue Wan was lying on the bed as usual and conveniently turned off the lights in the room. The bedroom was pitch black and in this quiet darkness, Sue Wan gradually fell asleep. The heavy rain was pouring down and an Audi was speeding along the winding mountain road. Chimu, be careful and drive. This rain is too heavy. How about we find a place to stop and rest? Who was talking in the car? So noisy. Stop. Do you fucking want to die? It was Chimu's voice. She didn't know why, but Sue Wan felt that this person's voice was particularly familiar. This mountain road has 18 turns and the line of sight isn't good under the heavy rain. Once we stop, aren't we waiting to be hit and sent flying? Even if there are no cars coming and going, what if the mountain rocks collapse and there's a mudslide or something? Chimu seemed somewhat flustered and exasperated. He knew that as long as he went out with Chen Yufeng, nothing good would happen. He shouldn't have agreed to be this nuisance's coolie driver in the first place. Chimu, be serious. Look at the road Fan Shu-jun's voice was very low and carried a bit of apprehension. Following Fan Shu-jun's voice, the Audi slipped a few times on the mountain road, swaying left and right. Sue Wan felt that her body was violently swaying and her forehead ruthlessly hit the seat in front. So painful, Sue Wan painfully rubbed her forehead. She raised her head and saw Fan Shu-jun's somewhat pale face in front of her. He seemed to be very nervous. Outside the car window, the heavy rain poured down, completely blurring everyone's line of sight. Sue Wan was somewhat dazed. She didn't know where she was for a long time. What a familiar feeling, but also very strange. This kind of specious feeling made Sue Wan's head start to ache again. Don't touch me. I have nothing to say to you. At this time, Bai Xiao Yu's sharp voice came from the back of the car. Hey, speak properly. When did I touch you? I just wanted to ask you for a favor. Do you have to dislike me so much? After all, we're all classmates. This was Chen Yufeng's voice. Sue Wan turned her head and saw Chen Yufeng and Bai Xiao Yu sitting behind everyone. Bai Xiao Yu's complexion was very bad, but Chen Yufeng's face was one of forbearance, as if he still wanted to say something to Bai Xiao Yu. Classmate. Hearing Chen Yufeng's words, Bai Xiao Yu shot him a disdainful glance. Just as she opened her mouth to say something, Yi Zixuan, who was sitting in front of the two people, suddenly shouted, Chimu, stop the car. Stop the car immediately. Yi Zixuan's voice came suddenly and very loud. Sue Wan thought that she understood Yi Zixuan very well, so in that sentence just now, she felt Yi Zixuan's fear. That's right. He was afraid. Very afraid. What was he afraid of? The ear-piercing sound of the brakes rang. The rear of the car swayed a bit, but it still steadily stopped by the roadside. I say, what are you all doing? Chi-Mu turned his body sideways and turned his head to look at the people in the car. The dissatisfaction in his gaze was obvious. Right at this time, a flash of lightning streaked across the sky. Su Wan only felt her eyes go white. Opening her eyes from her sleep, Su Wan's gaze went from muddled to clear and gradually became incomparably frightened. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Su Wan widened her eyes and motionlessly looked at the ceiling of her bedroom. Something was dripping from the ceiling drop by drop. Su Wan's heart tightened and her body stiffened. The feeling of fright rushed into her brain from her limbs and bones. That. What is it? In the darkness, there seemed to be something moving on the ceiling. That thing slowly converged into a number. 5. Su Wan couldn't help but open her mouth. The moment her voice came out, the number on the ceiling suddenly magnified dozens of times, occupying the entire roof. Like a boulder, it fiercely smashed down towards Su Wan's body. Su Wan was in a trance for a moment. When she regained consciousness again, she saw gravel all over the ground and bloodstains all over the ground. The torrential rain continued. A black Audi was crushed by countless gravel. The car had long been seriously deformed. From the gaps between the gravel, she could see a few arms powerlessly swinging, as if seeking the final redemption. Blood mixed with the rain and dyed the entire road scarlet red. Su Wan felt cold all over and a chill ran down her spine. Car accident, luxury car. The car accident that the head nurse said that several people died was this one. Yes, they didn't encounter the scene of a car accident on that mountain road and didn't take a detour. The luxury car that was flattened by a mountain rock was Chen Yufeng's Audi that several of them were riding in. They got into a car accident. Some died and some were unconscious. Su Wan suddenly remembered everything. Now, they were trapped in a dream world. Here, the living had to find the people who really died in the car accident and kill them again to end the dream. And those who died had to think of ways to kill the living in the dream to seize their chance of survival. This was a nightmare world without any bottom line or human feelings. If you want to live, you can't be soft-hearted. Once you are soft-hearted, it means losing your life. The lamp in the bedroom was turned on by someone. Su Wan sat on the bed with a pale face. Looking at the alarm clock beside the bed, Su Wan shrunk her body and clenched her hands tightly. What did the Arabic number 5 represent? 5 people? Or 5 ghosts? Am I a human or a ghost right now? Despair and panic that she had never felt before surrounded Su Wan tightly in the center. Her tightly clenched hands loosened and her arms tightly hugged her knees. Dong dong dong, dong dong dong. At this time, there was a sudden and loud knock on the door of Su Wan's house. Su Wan seemed to be frightened and subconsciously wanted to shrink herself in the quilt, but the knocking outside the door became more and more urgent and forceful. Who is it? The hands of the alarm clock showed the current time, 12:30 midnight. The knocking at the door in the middle of the night was strange and dangerous everywhere. Su Wan opened the door. It seemed that the person who knocked on the door was impatient. He finally shouted at the sturdy security door. This voice is. Chapter 26. A familiar voice came intermittently through the door. In this quiet night, it seemed especially abrupt and ear-piercing. Su Wan frantically ran off the bed. She didn't care about wearing slippers and stumbled all the way to the living room. Because she was too flustered, her knee knocked against the glass coffee table in the middle of the living room. But right now, Su Wan didn't have time to care about this. Her fingers trembled as she opened the door lock and saw the familiar figure standing at the door. Without hesitation, she threw herself into that person's embrace. Zixian, is that you? Su Wan's voice was full of panic and a pair of slender arms tightly embraced the man in front of her. Su Wan. Yi Zixian's voice sunk. It's me, are you alright? When Su Wan heard Yi Zixian's question, her eyes immediately reddened. Zixian, I'm so scared. What should I do? What should I do? She frantically raised her head, a pair of watery eyes filled with fear. Don't be scared. Yi Zishen's voice seemed to have some kind of magic that gradually calmed Su Wan's emotions. You're home alone. Yi Zishen glanced at the dark living room. He had just knocked on the door for a long time and only Su Wan ran out. It seems that her parents went to work the night shift again. Su Wan responded and seemed to have thought of something. She suddenly jumped out of Yi Zishen's embrace. Come in and sit. Turning around and turning on the ceiling light in the living room, Su Wan somewhat unnaturally pulled at the collar of her pajamas and lowered her head, a little afraid to meet Yi Zishen's gaze. After all, they already broke up. What happened to your knee? Yi Zishen's eyes were sharp and he saw Su Wan's bruised knee with a glance. There was already blood seeping out, a deep red appearance. No, nothing. I accidentally knocked it just now. Su Wan, who was no longer flustered, finally returned to her usual appearance. I'll go get water for you. Do you still want to drink green tea? No. Yi Zishen sat on the sofa, his gaze very deep. Plain water is fine. Oh. Su Wan's heart didn't feel good, but her face still reluctantly revealed a trace of a smile. Wait, I'll go to the kitchen and get it for you. Looking at her back as she turned and left, Yi Zishen's gaze became even more complicated and hard to explain. Who should he trust in this world? Was Su Wan worth trusting? Actually, Yi Zishen also didn't know if he should unreservedly believe in his ex-girlfriend or not. But now, compared to the other people in the dormitory, Su Wan was undoubtedly the most harmless one. Because he had a special ability, even if Su Wan had any evil intentions towards him, he could discover it at the first moment and control her. Yi Zishen leaned on the sofa and gently closed his eyes. The moment of the accident flashed through his mind. The collapse of the mountain rocks was too sudden, and Yi Zishen barely managed to activate time reversal at the last moment. Now that his ability had been upgraded to the 5th rank, he could reverse time by 30 seconds. After going back in time, they could still hear Chen Yufeng and Bai Xiaoyu quarreling in the car. But Yi Zishen already couldn't care that much. He used all his strength and shouted for Qi Mu to stop the car. At that moment, he was terrified. It wasn't until Qi Mu stopped the car by the roadside did Yi Zishen let out a long sigh of relief. Was he saved? No. When the accident happened again, Yi Zishen was completely dumbfounded. Flustered and exasperated, he once again reversed the flow of time. Again and again, even though he had already reversed the flow of time, the accident still kept happening. At different times, at different locations, the only thing that was the same was their fates. This was an unchangeable fate. When Yi Zishen understood this point and opened his eyes again, he was already in the hospital ward. Here, drink some water. Su Wan held a cup of plain water and quietly stood in front of Yi Zishen. Seeing him leaning tiredly on the sofa, Su Wan pursed her lips, hesitated, and still asked in a small voice, "Do you also?" "No." "About that car accident, about this dreamlike world." Yi Zishen suddenly opened his eyes and a sharp glint flashed in his eyes. "Su Wan, do you believe me?" "I believe." Su Wan heavily nodded her head. "Why?" Yi Zishen seriously looked at Su Wan's face, seemingly unwilling to let go of any minute changes in her expression. "Because you came to protect me at the first moment. Although we already broke up, but I believe you." Su Wan faintly smiled at Yi Zishen, her gaze surprisingly bright. In that bright gaze, there was an unconcealable tenderness like water. Yi Zishen nodded, stood up and raised his hand to press down on Su Wan's shoulder. "Among everyone, I also believe in you the most. Su Wan, don't worry, I will protect you." Hearing Yi Zishen's solemn vow, Su Wan's face couldn't help but turn a little red. "Then what do we do now? How do we find those ghosts?" Su Wan didn't believe that she would die. She felt that she was definitely truly alive. Hearing Su Wan's words, Yi Zishen hesitated for a moment. He focused his gaze and fixedly looked at Su Wan. "Have you ever seen something very special, such as a mysterious number?" "Number?" Su Wan's gaze brightened. "5. I've seen the number 5 in my dreams. Zishen, have you seen it before? You saw 5. Yi Zishen's expression slightly changed. What? Don't tell me that you didn't see 5. Su Wn felt Yi Zishen's change and immediately asked nervously. I saw 9. Yi Zishen replied in a low voice. 9? Su Wan also froze for a good while. Originally, she thought that the number she saw was the number of people in the human and ghost camps, but Yi Zishen saw 9. Then her thoughts must be wrong. Don't tell me that this number didn't represent the number of people, but rather the serial number of each person? Su Wan represented number 5 and Yi Zishen was number 9? Chapter 28. In the narrow living room, a fresh and pleasant folk song was playing. Although the sound wasn't loud, it could still be heard clearly in this quiet night. Su Wan had already changed out of her pajamas and wore loose sportswear. She sat on one end of the sofa and Yi Zishen sat on the other end of the sofa. He was the same as usual, wearing a simple shirt and blue jeans. In the past, Su Wan didn't feel that Yi Zishen was very handsome and charming. Although Yi Zishen became somewhat different in a short period of time after the two broke up, Su Wan still liked this kind of quiet and calm Yi Zishen. She didn't really like the way he showed off his ability. That wasn't the person in her memory. How about you go back and sleep? I'll help you keep watch. Because he knew that this was the world of dreams, Yi Zishen had a bold guess. He felt that Su Wan's parents would definitely not appear again and this night had become especially dangerous. So, he decided to stay. But seeing Su Wan accompany him with a tired face, Yi Zishen thought about it and still decided to persuade her to go back and rest. After all, Su Wan's physical strength was limited and she basically didn't have any fighting strength. She staying by his side, other than being a trustworthy teammate, she was basically useless. Hearing Yi Zishen's words, Su Wan, who was on the sofa, rubbed her eyes in a daze. It's nothing, I can still persevere. Don't worry about me, you. Yi Zishen still wanted to say something but his voice suddenly stopped. He heard the sound of footsteps, especially hurried and heavy. Su Wan also became spirited at this time. She also heard the sound and the footsteps were getting closer and closer. Finally, it stopped. Dong dong dong, dong dong dong. Urgent knocking sounds rang out. Su Wan suddenly stood up from the sofa and looked at Yi Zishen with a pale face. Yi Zishen also stood up and made a shushing gesture at Su Wan. Who would come at this time? Yi Zishen tiptoed to the door and looked out from the peephole of the security door. The person outside the door was holding the door with one hand, and his head was lowered. Yi Zishen could not see his face, and could only see the top of his head, but he could tell that the person was a man. He was tall and slender, wearing a beige shirt and grey trousers, and in the crook of the man's arm was a grey suit. The suit was stained with blood that had not yet dried, and was very red. As if impatient from waiting, the person outside the door began to forcefully knock on the door again. The moment he raised his hand, Yi Zishen finally saw the appearance of the person outside the door. It was Chi-Mu. Yi Zishen wrinkled his brows and turned to look at Su Wan behind him. He moved his lips and whispered in her ear, "It's Chi-Mu. How did he know your address?" Chi-Mu? Su Wan's face was puzzled. She thought for a long time. It seemed that when she was in the car, Chi-Mu asked which district she lived in. But at that time, Su Wan only said the name of the district and didn't tell him which building she lived in. Su Wan, quickly open the door, Laozi is dying of pain. Chi-Mu, who was outside the door, finally couldn't bear it anymore and began to shout loudly at the door, "I know you're at the door. Quickly open the door for me. I had a car accident." As he spoke, Chi-Mu raised his arm and the side of his face at the peephole. Sure enough, there were injuries on the side of his face and his arm. Blood was still flowing non-stop. Should I open the door? Su Wan subconsciously looked at Yi Zishen. Yi Zishen leaned against Su Wan's ear and whispered a few words. Then he quietly turned around and left, hiding in Su Wan's parents' bedroom. Who? Su Wan took a deep breath and her fingers trembled as she placed them on the door lock. After hesitating for a moment, she finally closed her eyes and used force to open the door. Hiss. Chi Mu pressed on his wound as he quickly rushed into the room, quickly closed the door. Not waiting for Su Wan's reaction, Chi Mu already forcefully closed the door and locked it twice. What are you doing? Su Wan vigilantly looked at the person in front of her. She wasn't familiar with Chi Mu. She only knew that he was Chen Yufeng's childhood friend and was a very rich playboy. What am I doing? Chi Mu raised his eyes and looked at Su Wan with a smile that wasn't a smile. The night is long and endless. What do you think I'm doing? You, don't come over. Su Wan retreated a few steps in panic. She casually picked up the ashtray on the coffee table and looked at Chi Mu vigilantly. Really can't help but tease. Chi Mu shook his head. Quickly go and find something to treat my wound. Otherwise, I'm afraid that before I get killed by the ghost, I'll torment myself to death. While speaking, Chi Mu didn't regard himself as an outsider and laid down on Su Wan's sofa. Ari, it's still your sofa that's comfortable. I really miss it. Miss what? Su Wan didn't understand what Chi Mu was saying at all. But looking at his arm that was still bleeding non-stop, Su Wan hesitated for a while and still found the family's medicine box in the small cabinet at the side of the living room. There's only these. See which ones you can use. Su Wan pushed the medicine box in front of Chi Mu and her tone was very cold. Chi Mu raised his eyebrows and skillfully bandaged his wound. He also took a mirror and applied some medicine to the small wound on his face. After doing all this, he looked down at the bloodstains on his body and frowned in disgust. Xiao Wan, you see that my clothes are dirty. Go and help me get a set of clothes. I remember that uncle's size is about the same as mine. I want that black set, the one in the left drawer of the wardrobe. As he spoke, Chi Mu leaned on the sofa and began to unbutton his shirt. How do you know? Su Wan looked at Chi Mu with even more vigilance. Her father's figure was indeed about the same as Chi Mu's. Moreover, Su Wan also knew that a few days ago, her mother bought a brand new black suit for her father. She planned to wear it to her grandmother's birthday banquet next month. At that time, Su Wan put it in the wardrobe, in the left drawer. I just know. Chi Mu slightly raised his chin, narrowed his eyes and looked at Su Wan with a smile. Moreover, I know more than this. In short, you'll follow me in the future. You're my woman. I will protect you. What nonsense are you talking about? Hearing Chi Mu's last sentence, Su Wan's face sank. She subconsciously glanced at the bedroom where Yizi Xian was hiding. I'm not familiar with you at all. You say. Did you follow me and investigate me? In the end, what are you trying to do? Hearing Su Wan's words, Chi Mu wrinkled his brows. His gaze changed from frivolous to complicated and hard to explain. Su Wan, at this time, is there any meaning in continuing to pretend? In the eyes of every ghost, there is another killing number. They will kill people in that order. If they don't kill people in the order of the game, those ghosts will be annihilated. During this period, we have to deduce and even find the ghosts hidden among us according to the number on the surface and the order of the people killed. Su Wan, I can tell you that your actual number is 4 and I'm 5. Before you, 3 people will die, and before the third person dies, you are absolutely safe. We have to find those ghosts during this period. When they are bound by the rules and can't make a move against us, eliminate them. Do you understand what I'm saying? Su Wan's eyes were filled with tears as she said this. Chi Mu gently raised his hand and an Arabic number 6 formed by black mist gradually appeared in his palm. You are number 5, I am number 6. In this layer of the dreamland, the rules of the game is to kill people in order. We will know our number in advance, from 1 to 9. It seems very simple, but in fact, this is only the number on the surface. In the eyes of every ghost, there is another killing number. I don't understand. Su Wan looked at Chi Mu and imperceptibly took a step back. Why do you know so much? Since you know the rules and know the real number, then, do you also know who the ghosts are? Who is the ghost? This, I really don't know. No, or rather, I should have known before. Speaking till here, Chi Mu's expression was somewhat helpless. Xiao Wan, I know that you still don't trust me right now, but you have to believe that I will never harm you. We don't have much time now, really not much. Chi Mu secretly glanced at the number in his other hand that was continuously counting down the time in the palm of his hand. He paid all the price in exchange for a chance to return to this layer of the dreamland. Although most of the memories related to this layer of the dreamland were blocked, he was confident that he could bring Su Wan alive and enter the next layer of the dreamland within 3 days. Chapter 29. Su Wan's mood was a bit chaotic. This night, her state of mind was confused. From that strange dream, to Yi Zishen's appearance, to Chi Mu suddenly saying those strange things. Su Wan's reason told her that she couldn't believe anyone at this time, but thinking of Yi Zishen's solemn vow, thinking of Chi Mu's indescribable but firm expression, Su Wan hesitated. Xiao Wan? Seeing Su Wan in a daze, Chi Mu couldn't help but lean forward, raising his hand as if he wanted to touch Su Wan's body that was not far from him. Su Wan returned to her senses and immediately dodged Chi Mu's hand in a panic. Chi Mu, wait here. I'll go get clothes for you. As she spoke, she ran into her parents' bedroom like she was escaping. Once the door to the bedroom closed, Su Wan felt her vision go black. Yi Zishen's whole body pressed down on her. Su Wan had no choice but to lean against the door. Zishen? She called out in a low voice, afraid that Chi Mu in the living room would hear. Ah! Yi Zishen only laughed lowly. That smile hid a deep ridicule and disdain. I really didn't expect that you would hook up with Chi Mu so quickly. Although he already thought it through after breaking up for half a year and let go, and because he had an ability, more people liked him. But hearing Chi Mu and Su Wan's conversation with his own ears, Yi Zishen still felt uncomfortable in his heart. How long has Su Wan been together with him? How many days has she and Chi Mu known each other? Not long ago, he naively thought that Su Wan still had a bit of reluctance to part with him. Now, it seems that it was nothing more than his own wishful thinking. He really is stupid. Didn't this woman leave him at that time because he was poor? And Chi Mu? Even if he's a silk pants who loves everyone he sees, but at least he's a rich and powerful second generation. Yi Zishen, what are you saying? Hearing Yi Zishen's words, Su Wan's face also became very cold. Didn't you hear what I said? I don't want to repeat it a second time. Yi Zishen retreated a few steps. Han Zeddy's gaze on Su Wan was like looking at a particularly dirty thing. I should have thought of it earlier. A vain woman like you can give up anything for money. Vain? When Su Wan heard Yi Zishen's words, she couldn't help but want to laugh. I just want to have a good life and make my family rich. Is this called vanity? Then what are you called? Is of inferiority, or is it? People live in this world for survival and money. What's wrong with liking money? I'm not stealing, robbing, or degrading myself. I just want to find a responsible partner who can make money and give me and my parents a good life. What's wrong with that? Yi Zishen, you've always been feeling inferior. You want to go back to the mountains because you shrink back at the sight of this bustling city. Of words. Of Zishen's face of WN. Of as if he heard the funniest joke in the world, Yi Zishen's gaze carried a bit of madness. Su Wan, it's you who has eyes but can't see the golden inlaid jade. In the future, I will definitely stand at the top of this society, but what about you? Apart from wanting to find a rich person, what else do you have? Yi Zishen's self-confidence was the same as all of those male leads who suddenly became rich overnight or those who opened a cheat. Yi Zishen's self-confidence was bursting at the seams. He only felt that he must have been blind to have taken a fancy to Su Wan, this kind of woman without character. Right now, he completely forgot that kind of apprehension when he was pursuing Su Wan and that kind of feeling of blaming the heavens and blaming others when he was lovelorn. After having ability, he felt that he can conquer the whole world, conquer all women. The current Su Wan in his eyes is really disgusting to death. He, Yi Zishen, is heaven's favored child. He will shine brightly in this world, and Su Wan, this kind of person, is not fit to stay by his side. Right now, only Meng Ting Yarrow, that kind of girl, can be barely worthy of him. Su Wan, originally when the crisis happened, the first person that I thought of was you. but you let me down too much. As he spoke, Yi Zixuan didn't look at Su Wan's face that was pale with anger. He quickly walked past her body and abruptly pushed open the bedroom door. So slow. Qi Mu, who was on the sofa, tilted his body and turned his head. Immediately, the expression on his face became sluggish for a moment. Yo, isn't this Yi Zixuan? His many years of experience made Qi Mu return to his normal state in an instant. He didn't forget to look at Yi Zixuan with a smile that wasn't a smile. In Yi Zixuan's eyes, Qi Mu had always been that kind of fickle and dissolute second generation. Although his appearance was considered handsome, but other than that skin that could deceive people, what else did he have? His, Qi Mu's, money and status all came from his father's generation. Separated from his family, he was nothing. This kind of rich second generation was what Yi Zixuan always looked down on the most. If it wasn't because Qi Mu was Chen Yufeng's childhood friend, Yi Zixuan wouldn't even be bothered to say a word to this kind of person. Facing Qi Mu's smile, Yi Zixuan looked at him with a deep and serene gaze. Then, he quickly turned around and walked towards the door. Yi Zixuan, who felt that he had already seen through Qi Mu's nature, felt that once he left, Su Wan's days tonight probably wouldn't be good. But she brought this upon herself. He wasn't prepared to explain anything for her. Chapter 30. Yi Zixuan, how about we make a deal? Qi Mu's voice was lazy. Yi Zixuan didn't need to turn his head to imagine first young master Qi's aloof appearance right now. Not interested. Yi Zixuan already unlocked the door and his hand was on the doorknob, as if he was about to open the door and leave. Don't you want to know what your real serial number is? Qi Mu's voice was heard again, carrying a lot of certainty. Yi Zixuan's leaving figure paused for a bit. Why should I trust you? Although he really wanted to know the answer, was Qi Mu really worthy of trust? How much he said was true and how much was false, other than himself, no one knew. You can also choose not to believe me. No one is forcing you, but... Qi Mu, who was on the sofa, lightly turned his body. Being together with us is undoubtedly the safest. Whether you choose to form an alliance with us or choose to fight alone, everything is up to you. Of course, if you feel that you can't bear to see me and Xiao Wan showing affection in front of you all day, then I also can't do anything about it. Who let me love her so much? I can't live without her. Go to hell. Su Wan, who had returned to the living room, happened to hear Qi Mu's last sentence. She forcefully threw the suit in her arms at Qi Mu's face and ruthlessly scolded him. Ayo, hitting is affection, scolding is love. I know you love me. Qi Mu pulled down the clothes on his face and gave Su Wan a roguish smile. Shameless. Su Wan glared at him and turned to see Yi Zixuan at the door. Her face became even colder. Why haven't you left yet? If it was said that not long ago, Su Wan was still considering whether or not to put down her pride and reconcile with Yi Zixuan, then the current Su Wan had already completely cut off that thought. She never thought that she would be such a shameless woman in Yi Zixuan's heart. It turns out that he never thought highly of her. A real man, if he truly liked a girl, even if they parted ways in the end, even if that girl abandoned herself, he would only feel a bit regretful. He wouldn't be like Yi Zixuan, childishly and conceited, and hurt people. After all, he had once truly loved her. Turning his head like this and degrading people to nothing, was he really a man? Su Wan was truly bitterly disappointed. She was originally the daughter of a small family in the city. She never felt that she was very noble, but she had never been looked down upon like this. Hearing Su Wan's cold words and turning his head to see her looking at him with a wounded face, Yi Zixuan couldn't help but sneer in his heart. Was she acting in front of Qi Mu? He acted as if he was a heartless man who had hurt her. At this very moment, Yi Zixuan suddenly did not want to leave. His gaze fell on Qi Mu's body. At this moment, our young master Qi was changing clothes on the sofa as if there was no one else present. The shirt that was stained with blood had long been thrown on the floor by him. Qi Mu, it's not impossible to cooperate with you, but your chips aren't enough. Yi Zixuan's tone and gaze were full of confidence. He had a life-saving ability, and his entire person became very confident. Yi Zixuan. Qi Mu fixed his eyes on Yi Zishen. This Yi Zishuan was indeed problematic. Qi Mu remembered that Chen Yufeng once described that Yi Zishen to him. That was a child who looked very cheerful and lively, but in reality, his heart was very fragile and self-abased. The other brothers in the dormitory always took his feelings into consideration and never had any conflicts with him. This kind of Yi Zishen suddenly became full of confidence and looked down on everyone. Who gave him this kind of confidence? Qi Mu looked at Yi Zishen with interest. Just now, I forgot to tell Xiao Wan that every living person who is killed by a ghost will directly become a ghost. In other words, our enemies are constantly increasing. En. Hearing Qi Mu's words, Yi Zishen's brows raised. In other words, it really increased the unpredictability. Although Yi Zishen was very confident in his ability had a time limit and the number of times he could use it. He couldn't use it more than 10 times a day. 10 times looked like a lot, but in this kind of crisis-ridden world, it was really somewhat dangerous. Also, Yi Zishen imperceptibly looked at Qi Mu and then looked at Su Wan at the side. These two people currently seemed to be more trustworthy. At least before Qi Mu appeared, Yi Zishen already gave Su Wan several opportunities to come into close contact with him. When he seemed to be defenseless, Su Wan didn't make any small movements. Therefore, she was at least a living person right now. As for Qi Mu, there were some mysteries on his body. He should be hiding some unknown secrets. Being together with him was better than being separated from him and then being schemed against behind his back. After pondering for a moment, Yi Zishen nodded at Qi Mu. I'll do this deal. I don't know if you still have any additional conditions. Since it was a deal, Yi Zishen believed that Qi Mu must have some request from him. Otherwise, he wouldn't stop him and wouldn't take the initiative to form an alliance with him. I have a condition. Qi Mu put away his playful expression and suddenly looked at Yi Zishen with a serious and solemn face. What I want you to do is very simple. If we encounter danger together, I hope that you can help me protect Su Wan to the best of your ability. Of course, I also don't expect you to always protect her. This time, I need you to protect her when I can't get away. That's enough. Yi Zishen, remember, this is a promise between men. You cannot agree to it. This way, our deal will be cancelled. Of course, if you agree to it, you must do it. Don't think of deceiving me. When Qi Mu's voice fell, Yi Zishen and Su Wan looked at him with extreme astonishment, as if it was the first time they met Qi Mu. Xiao Wan, are you touched by me? Do you want to devote your life to me? Qi Mu, who was at the side, caught a glimpse of Su Wan's gaze and immediately climbed up. He never forgot to increase his infatuation index in front of Su Wan. And Su Wan, who just had a trace of palpitation in her heart, saw Qi Mu's expression that seemed like a smile yet not a smile and immediately angrily turned her face away. Chapter 31. The night was long and dangerous. The three people who temporarily formed an alliance gathered in the living room of Su Wan's house, not feeling sleepy at all. Time was still passing by minute and it was going to be 3 in the morning soon. It's coming. Qi Mu already wore a white shirt and a black suit. Although he was dressed like an elite, the expression on his face was still sloppy. But after saying this sentence, he suddenly wrinkled his brows. The clock stopped at 3 in the morning and Qi Mu's cell phone rang at this time. Looking at the familiar name on the screen, Qi Mu's gaze slowly became gloomy. It's Chen Yufeng. Yi Zishen had been paying attention to Qi Mu's movements. Seeing his expression change, he couldn't help but take the initiative to ask. En. Qi Mu softly gave an en sound. Then, he looked deeply at Yi Zishen and Su Wan, who had been curled up in the other corner of the sofa. This dreamland space has very strict rules. For example, we will awaken our memories after midnight and those dead ghosts will definitely have a set time to start killing people. For example, 3 in the morning, late at night. Su Wan glanced at the clock on the wall that stopped at 3 and a bone-chilling feeling slowly rose from the bottom of her heart. At 3 o'clock, Chen Yufeng immediately called Qi Mu. What does it represent? Thinking of this, Su Wan immediately looked at Chi Mu nervously. Chi Mu once again lazily leaned on the sofa and picked up the phone as if nothing happened. Our phone, is something the matter? Chi Mu, where are you? I had a nightmare. I want to talk to you. On the phone, Chen Yufeng kept gasping for breath. It was very clear that he still hadn't recovered from the dream. I'm outside right now. You go to my villa in the western suburbs and wait for me. I'll go back immediately. Saying this, not waiting for Chen Yufeng to respond, Chi Mu already hung up the phone. Playing with the phone, Chi Mu flicked his suit and slowly stood up. Let's go. We'll go meet him. You can do it. Seeing Chi Mu's calm appearance, Yi Zixuan couldn't help but ask. Why can't I do it? Speaking till here, Chi Mu's gaze deepened as he turned to look at Su Wan. If Fang Tian isn't a person, Xiao Wan, remember not to be soft-hearted. Fang Tian, Su Wan's heart moved. She thought of her best friend. That girl was so timid. She would be fine, right? But why hasn't that coward contacted me since 12:30 a.m.? Su Wan was somewhat flustered. According to Fang Tian's personality, if she knew that she was in such a strange and dangerous dreamland, shouldn't she seek help from others at the first moment? Could it be that she was already? Su Wan didn't dare to think further. She could only muddle-headedly go downstairs under the protection of Yi Zixuan and Chi Mu. Chi Mu's car was still parked downstairs, but one side of the car door was completely dented. Seeing the broken car door, Chi Mu helplessly shrugged his shoulders. I was too anxious when I came and there was an accident. But you can rest assured that my driving skills are absolutely very powerful. It was so awesome that everyone got into a car accident. Su Wan didn't say anything. Actually, she also knew that the car accident wasn't Chi Mu's fault. Wasn't it because they were too unlucky? Not only did he encounter a car accident, but he was also pulled into this world of dreams. The three people finally got into the car. Chi Mu drove the car, thinking about his villa in the western suburbs. At this time, in a high-class residential area in the city center, Fang Tian was wrapped in a black trench coat and blindly followed behind a person. The two people took advantage of the darkness of the night to quickly walk out of the entrance of the residential area. That figure suddenly stopped. Fang Tian, who was behind him, didn't expect it and directly bumped into that person. His body was very cold. Qin Lu? Fang Tian's face reddened. Are you okay? I'm fine. Qin Lu's voice was very low and the cold air on his body was even more intense. Your body is very cold. How about I return the trench coat to you? Fang Tian nervously and shyly wanted to pull the trench coat off her body, but was stopped by Qin Lu who was beside her. I'm not cold. Your body isn't good, so wear it first. Let's take a taxi and go find Su Wan. En. As soon as he mentioned Su Wan, Fang Tian's eyes brightened again. Actually, when she woke up from the nightmare, she thought of contacting Su Wan. But as luck would have it, when she dialed the number, she directly connected to Qin Lu's cell phone. Perhaps, only in this kind of crisis can one truly see through one's heart. In the wee hours of the morning, the streets were especially empty. Just when Fang Tian thought that they wouldn't be able to get a taxi, a pure black taxi stopped in front of the two people. What a strange taxi. Chapter 32. The western suburbs of Sea City were surrounded by mountains and rivers. On the scenic mountainside, there was a large villa complex. Chi Mu's villa was in this group of villas. This was a birthday gift that his father gave him during his 18th birthday party. That year, his coming-of-age party was held in this villa. Since then, this place became the place where he and his group of friends gathered and played. At this time, Chi Mu slowly drove the car into the spacious road. On both sides of the road were independent villas. From afar, he saw Chen Yufeng's car. The red Ferrari was parked on the roadside. Chen Yufeng, who was dressed in black, was leaning against the car. In front of him, there was a little red light that flickered. Chi Mu knew that he was smoking. Chen Yufeng had not abstained from smoking and drinking since he was young, but because he was still in school, his smoking addiction was not big. Only when he was particularly irritated or panicked would he keep smoking. Creak. Chi Mu sped up and the car suddenly stopped in front of Chen Yufeng. Chen Yufeng, who was in a daze, heard the sound of brakes and immediately raised his head nervously. He saw Chi Mu slowly walking down from the car. Fuck, Feng, you're not sleeping in the middle of the night. What do you want to do by calling me out? As usual, Chi Mu put one hand on the car door and the other hand unbuttoned his suit. His face was in a bad mood. Chen Yufeng did not speak. The smoke made people unable to see his expression clearly. Why is she in your car? Chen Yufeng saw Su Wen sitting in the front passenger seat. As for Yi Xian, who was lying in the back seat, he naturally could not see him. My girl, not in my car in the middle of the night. Could it be that she's in your car? Chi Mu raised his hand and knocked on the car window. Xiao Wen, get down. Su Wen hesitated and unwillingly got off the car. Chen Yufeng stared at Su Wen and then looked at Chi Mu with a deep meaning. Mu, you're good. You got her so quickly. As soon as she heard Chen Yufeng's words, Su Wan's face became even darker. Chi Mu had a complacent smile on his face. He strode in front of Chen Yufeng and used his body to block Chen Yufeng and Su Wan's line of sight. Feng, are you envious? Do you want this older brother to teach you a few more moves? Haven't you always been pestering that Meng Ting Yarrow? Hearing Meng Ting Yarrow's name, Chen Yufeng just froze for a moment. He took the cigarette and took a deep breath. Then he looked at Chi Mu with a serious face and said, Chi Mu, you also had that dream, right? I know who the ghost is. Let's kill her together, okay? At the end of his speech, Chen Yufeng's hand that was holding the cigarette was trembling. Who? Chi Mu raised his hand and threw away the cigarette between Chen Yufeng's fingers. Then he put one hand on Chen Yufeng's shoulder and stared at his face. Do you know who it is? Yes, Chen Yufeng seemed to have made a great decision. A ruthless color flashed in his eyes. It's by Xiao Yu. By Xiao Yu. Su Wan. Su Wan. Fang Tian knocked on the door of Su Wan's house for a long time and shouted for a long time. In the end, there was no sound in the room. In the end, Fang Tian's voice was somewhat choked with sobs. Qinlu, what should we do? I can't get through to Su Wan's phone either. Do you think something has happened to her? Something has happened? It shouldn't be that fast. Qinlu seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly lifted his foot and kicked open the door of Su Wan's house. This. Fang Tian was stupefied. Qinlu walked to the living room as if there was no one else present. He saw the set of clothes with blood scattered in the living room. Qinlu's eyes flashed. There's blood. Fang Tian, who came in later, saw the clothes on the floor and couldn't help but shout, oh no, oh no. Su Wan must have met with danger. Qinlu, quickly think of a way to save her. She should still be alive for the time being. Qinlu crouched down and carefully looked at the expensive suit and shirt. Among the 9 of them, only Chen Yufeng and Chi Mu could afford to wear this set of clothes. Could it be? Chi Mu came? For a moment, Qinlu's gaze flickered. He hesitantly took out his phone, hesitating whether or not he should give Chi Mu a call to confirm. And at this time, Chen Yufeng's eyes widened as he looked at Chi Mu, who was in front of him in disbelief. Chi Mu's hand was holding a sharp dagger. At this moment, the dagger had accurately pierced Chen Yufeng's body. Chi Mu, you. Chen Yufeng's hand that was stained with blood stiffly wanted to grab Chi Mu's hand, but at this time, Chi Mu pushed the dagger in his hand away. I know you're a ghost. Chi Mu leaned on Chen Yufeng's ear and said in a low voice, if I didn't guess incorrectly, Bai Xiao Yu is serial number 1, right? Serial number 1, according to the rules of this world, all ghosts' first target was Bai Xiao Yu. After Bai Xiao Yu died, they could go and kill the second serial number 1 target. I. In the end, Chen Yufeng looked at Chi Mu as if he wanted to say something. He seemed to have obtained relief. He opened his mouth and finally closed his eyes. The blood that clearly flowed all over the ground actually slowly decreased until it disappeared. Chen Yufeng died. No, perhaps it should be said that Chen Yufeng disappeared. It had disappeared completely. If it wasn't for that eye-catching Ferrari still parked at the side, Su Wn would even doubt whether Chen Yufeng had really appeared before. You killed him? Seeing Chi Mu turn around and calmly walk towards her, Su Wn subconsciously retreated half a step. You're scared? Chi Mu looked at Su Wan and raised his eyebrows. He wanted me to help him kill Bai Xiao Yu. I think Bai Xiao Yu should be serial number 1. Su Wan, you have to be clear. If I was serial number 1, I'm afraid Chen Yufeng would not hesitate to make a move against me. While speaking, Chi Mu had already walked in front of Su Wan. Su Wan, in the face of life and death, everyone will choose to protect themselves. This is human nature. It has nothing to do with morality. If we can't even protect ourselves, then we might as well not be human anymore. Human nature. Su Wan gently turned around. That's right, if it was her, between her own life and someone else's life, she would not hesitate to choose to protect herself, right? After all, everyone wants to live. Returning to the car, Yi Zixuan was sitting in the back seat to rest. He actually didn't expect Chi Mu to be so straightforward. On the way here, Chi Mu had him hide. Yi Zixuan thought that Chi Mu needed his help. Now it seems that he was only lowering Chen Yufeng's vigilance. Su Wan and Chi Mu were alone together in the middle of the night. It wasn't strange for a man and a woman to be alone. But if he was also in Chi Mu's car and was seen by Chen Yufeng, he would definitely be suspicious. He didn't expect this dandy young master to be so meticulous. Yi Zixuan's evaluation of Chi Mu unconsciously changed. His vigilance towards him also became higher and higher. Where are we going now? Are we going to find Bai Xiao Yu? Seeing Chi Mu start the car, Yi Zixuan couldn't help but ask. Bai Xiao Yu. Chi Mu nodded. I hope she's still alive. Serial number 1. Su Wan subconsciously tightened her seatbelt. Chen Yufeng could think of finding someone to kill Bai Xiao Yu, then what about the other ghosts? Did they already make a move? Just like how Chi Mu was worried, Su Wan was also very worried about Bai Xiao Yu's situation. At this time, Bai Xiao Yu was indeed like what everyone was worried about. Her situation was worrisome. In the narrow alley, Bai Xiao Yu covered her injured arm and ran all the way, leaving a long and thin trail of blood behind her. Chapter 33. When she woke up from the dream, the whole world changed. Empty streets, a strange long night. Meng Ting Yarrow clenched the knife hidden in her sleeves and quietly walked alone on the quiet street. She didn't know where to go. The servants in the house seemed to have disappeared overnight. The whole house was frighteningly quiet. When the clock stopped at 3 o'clock, Meng Ting Yarrow's heart was even more flustered. She left the house alone. Before she left, she picked a knife that wasn't too big but looked very sharp in the kitchen and hid it in her sleeves. What should she do? Who should she believe? Meng Ting Yarrow remembered that she always carried her phone with her. At this time, she actually didn't know who to contact. Perhaps it was because of her noble birth. Meng Ting Yarrow had always been a goddess in everyone's mind, elegant and inviolable. Everyone saw her cold and aloof side. No one was willing to be friends with her, and those boys were all infatuated with her. Meng Ting Yarrow had long been tired of this kind of life. In fact, it wasn't that she didn't try to make friends with others, but the difference in family background and environment made her seem out of place with everyone. Or on the weekend, the girls in the same dormitory liked to go shopping on the pedestrian street. But Meng Ting Yarrow never wore clothes from other places except for the largest luxury jewelry store in Sea City. During the classmate dinner, everyone chose the popular buffet restaurant and then the KTV room with a reasonable price. In Meng Ting Yarrow's eyes, these were particularly tacky and crowded. They were all particularly unhygienic and unsafe places. She couldn't adapt to this kind of environment, which made her seem out of place. Because she couldn't adapt, everyone felt that she was aloof and disdained to be associated with others. Later, Meng Ting Yarrow wanted to make up for her relationship with others. She also learned to treat others to a Western restaurant for a meal. But later, others said that she looked down on others and deliberately bullied them. Meng Ting Yarrow had always been unable to understand these. She was used to clothes with taste and style. She looked at those clothes from small brands and simply looked down on them. What was wrong with her? She never looked down on people who wore clothes from small brands. She didn't even mind that her friends only wore clothes from street stalls that cost less than 100 yuan. However, she didn't mind, but others always minded. Meng Ting Yarrow knew that there was a phrase in this world called hate the rich. In some people's eyes, whatever the rich do is wrong. Whatever they buy is just putting on airs. Perhaps, no one was willing to help her now. No one would believe in themselves. As Meng Ting Yarrow thought like this, bitterness unconsciously spread from the bottom of her heart. Help! Help! Right at this time, Meng Ting Yarrow suddenly heard intermittent cries for help coming from the alley not far away. Who was it? Meng Ting Yarrow hesitated, but in the end, she couldn't help but be curious and quietly walked over. The alley was very dark. Meng Ting Yarrow could only vaguely see the silhouette of two people. It seemed to be a man chasing a woman. What was worth noting was that the man was holding a knife in his hand. The body of the knife was still reflecting white light. His left-handed. Meng Ting Yarrow took a deep look at the man's left hand that was holding the knife. Gradually, that woman already ran close to her. She still didn't give up and continued to call for help. Help! Someone come quickly. Someone save me. It was already so dangerous, but the woman's voice did not tremble at all, and this slightly androgynous voice was so familiar. This is, Meng Ting Yarrow's body suddenly froze. She could tell that it was Bai Xiao Yu's voice. Bai Xiao Yu. Almost in an instant, Meng Ting Yarrow shouted and rushed out. Although after several efforts, Meng Ting Yarrow didn't become true friends with Bai Xiao Yu and the others, but after staying in the same dormitory for so long, everyone still had some feelings. Meng Ting Yarrow couldn't remain indifferent at this time. Moreover, she knew even more clearly that if she didn't save Bai Xiao Yu, then the next one to die might be herself. The figure that was chasing each other froze for a moment the moment Meng Ting Yarrow appeared. Meng Ting Yarrow! Meng Ting Yarrow, quickly save me. Bai Xiao Yu seemed to have grabbed onto the last straw. After a brief daze, she suddenly rushed towards Meng Ting Yarrow's direction. And the man who had been chasing behind her hesitated at this moment. After that, he actually changed his direction and quickly escaped. Bai Xiao Yu's expression changed. Bai Xiao Yu. Right now, Meng Ting Yarrow's palms were all sweaty. Seeing that that person actually left by himself, she breathed a sigh of relief. After that, she immediately greeted Bai Xiao Yu. You're injured? Meng Ting Yarrow's palms touched the wet and slippery bloodstain. Her movements stiffened for a moment. Fortunately, I won't die. Fortunately, this Mrs. Foundation is good. Although Bai Xiao Yu, who grew up in the society, was strictly prohibited by Boss Bai from contacting the brothers in the society, she still secretly learned some martial arts. Bai Xiao Yu, who was finally out of danger, leaned to the side. She dealt with the wounds on her body with ease and familiarity while raising her eyes to look at Meng Ting Yarrow. It's really all thanks to you. Meng Ting Yarrow, why are you here? Meng Ting Yarrow took a deep breath and raised her eyes to look at the direction that person just escaped. Bai Xiao Yu, you should also know what kind of situation we're in right now. Just now, that person who wanted to kill you, who was it? He. Is he a ghost? Ghost. Here, there was no difference between ghosts and people. Chapter 34. Boss Bai's territory was in the northern part of Sea City. This was an old part of the city and public security had always been bad. Chi Mu's car drove to a park in the northern part of the city. Su Wan wanted to give Bai Xiao Yu a call. After rummaging through her clothes for a long time, Su Wan discovered that she didn't know where she lost her phone. I'll do it. Yi Xian, who was sitting in the back seat, took out his cell phone. Because of his poverty, his cell phone was still an old model made in China, and it was a second-hand one that had been used by a relative. Yi Xian found Bai Xiao Yu's number in the phone book and immediately called her. The call connected, but no one answered. Yi Xian frowned. Just when he thought that the call would be automatically hung up, the call was suddenly connected. Yi Xian. A crisp and pleasant female voice came from the phone, and there was a hint of doubt in her tone. This was not Bai Xiao Yu's voice. Yi Xian didn't speak, But the other side of the phone paused for a moment before speaking again. I'm Meng Ting Yao. I'm with Bai Xiao Yu right now. Meng Ting Yao? Yi Zishuan immediately remembered Meng Ting Yao's aloof and delicate face. Meng Ting Yao was publicly recognized as the campus belle goddess. She was the dream lover and object of countless male students. Just like other boys, although Yi Zishen never pursued Meng Ting Yao, this didn't hinder him from admiring the beauty of the goddess in his heart. So when he heard Meng Ting Yao's voice at this moment, Yi Zishen's expression subconsciously eased up a lot. You're together with Bai Xiao Yu right now? Did you encounter any danger? Danger? Meng Ting Yao on the phone seemed a bit surprised. What danger? Bai Xiao Yu is the ghost's first target. She is in danger now, and you will be in danger if you are with her. Where are you now? We'll go and find you. Yi Zishen's tone was a bit anxious, and Su Wn, who was in front of the car, slightly frowned when she heard his words. You guys. Compared to Yi Zishen's anxiety, Meng Ting Yao appeared very calm. Actually, she had been testing Yi Zishen's attitude all along. Now, she actually let down her guard against him, but the word we made her hesitate again. Who was Yi Zishen with? Was the person with him trustworthy? Who are you with? Meng Ting Yao wanted to first confirm the identity of the person with Yi Zishen. It is Su Wan and Chi Mu. Su Wan, Chi Mu? Meng Ting Yao paused for a moment and immediately whispered, Bai Xiao Yu is injured. We're in a very safe place right now. You can come and find us, but you can only be alone. Meng Ting Yao felt that Yi Zishen could be trusted, but she didn't trust him 100%. As for Chi Mu, she didn't trust him even more. Therefore, she only asked Yi Zishen to meet them alone. This could greatly guarantee the safety of both parties. If Yi Zishen was also untrustworthy, at least he was only one person right now. She and Bai Xiao Yu could deal with him. If Su Wan or Chi Mu was added, then it would be more troublesome. Hearing Meng Ting Yao's proposal, Yi Zishen only thought for a moment and immediately agreed to her request. After that, Yi Zishuan hung up the phone, and the car was silent for a moment. Have you thought it through? Chi Mu shot a glance at Yi Zishen. Yi Zishen nodded his head. It's not that there are no benefits for us to act separately right now. Actually, Yi Zishen's thinking was very simple. Since Bai Xiao Yu was number one, then as long as he was always by Bai Xiao Yu's side, once someone came to kill her, he would activate his ability. That way, he could catch all the remaining ghosts in one fell swoop. This was the fastest and most effective method. Another point was that regarding this world's rules, Yi Zishen felt that it wasn't as simple as what Chi Mu said. Since ghosts could obtain the right to live by killing people, then wouldn't people who killed ghosts also get the corresponding reward? Otherwise, why would Chi Mu kill Chen Yufeng without hesitation? Yi Zishen had long been suspicious of Chi Mu. And now that he knew Bai Xiao Yu's whereabouts, he had the opportunity to use practical actions to prove his guess. It can be said that in this kind of environment, the trust between people had reached the most fragile critical point. Yi Zishen wanted to maximize the benefits and make himself as safe as possible. This was also human nature. Since it's like this, you get off. We'll meet again someday. Chi Mu unlocked the car door and Yi Zishen got off the car without hesitation and left. Su Wn saw Yi Zishen get off the car from the rearview mirror and walk towards the alley while dialing a phone. What, you can't bear to part with it? Chi Mu noticed Su Wan's gaze and couldn't help but ask. Su Wn shook her head and retracted her gaze. There's nothing to be reluctant to part with it. I just feel that I've never truly understood Yi Zishen. As she spoke, Su Wn leaned her entire upper body on the back of the chair and lightly exhaled. Chi Mu, what should we do next? Are you hungry? Chi Mu didn't answer Su Wan's words. Instead, he asked without any reason. Hungry? That kind of trembling feeling of fear already made Su Wn not feel hungry. At this time, when she heard Chi Mu's question, she suddenly felt a bit hungry. Let's go eat. I know a restaurant that makes very delicious side dishes. But Su Wan wanted to say something, but Chi Mu was already speeding on the road. There were no traffic jams or red lights along the way. Su Wan suddenly felt a bit sleepy. She drowsily leaned on the seat and fell asleep. Seeing that she fell asleep, Chi Mu subconsciously slowed down the car. He tilted his head and his gaze slid over Su Wan's face again and again. "Sleep well. You'll get better." Chi Mu whispered a sentence and turned the car into a one-way street according to his memory. On the empty street, Fan Shu-jun silently walked by himself. His shadow was stretched very, very long under the streetlights. He didn't remember how far he walked when the phone's ringtone pulled him back to reality. Fan Shu-jun took out his phone. His phone's screen was still stuck with dried bloodstains. That was by Xiao Yu's blood. In the dim light, the white light of the phone screen was particularly dazzling. Looking at the 3 words Yi Zi Xian, Fan Shu-jun sneered and pressed the hang-up button. Immediately after, he continued to stroll on the street, like a wandering spirit in the middle of the night. Until the phone rang once again. This time, the number displayed on the screen was Qin Lu. Truly troublesome. Fan Shu-jun suddenly raised his hand and threw the phone in his hand into the bushes. Then, he somewhat impatiently took off his glasses. That pair of misty big eyes, at this moment, became a lot clearer. Where should I go next? Who will I meet next? Right now, Fan Shu-jun seemed to be standing at a crossroads in confusion. His entire person's complexion was particularly bad. At this time, a car suddenly slowly drove over from the corner of the street. Fan Shu-jun froze for a moment and immediately hid behind a flower bed on the roadside. That car drove very slowly, so Fan Shu-jun could clearly see Su Wan, who was sitting on the front passenger seat, sleeping peacefully, and Chi Mu, who was beside her, concentrating on driving. How could Su Wan and Chi Mu be together? Fan Shu-jun was a bit puzzled, but in the next second, his whole body stiffened. A blood-stained hand suddenly rested on Fan Shu-jun's shoulder and the smell of blood assaulted his nostrils. "Don't be nervous, it's me." A somewhat fleeting voice came from behind. Fan Shu-jun's taut nerves immediately relaxed. "Why are you here? Who injured you?" Chapter 35. When Chi Mu carefully carried Su Wan out of the car, Su Wan woke up. "Don't move." Seeing that she was going to struggle, Chi Mu subconsciously hugged the person in his arms. "You just woke up. Be careful not to catch a cold. I'll hold you." The elegantly decorated restaurant was empty. The lights in the hall were lit, but there wasn't a single guest and there wasn't a trace of any service staff. Chi Mu carried Su Wan to a private room and gently placed her on the innermost seat. "I used to come here often. I'll go to the kitchen to see if there's anything to eat. You rest here for a bit." Seeing Chi Mu's departing back, Su Wan stared blankly for a while. When Chi Mu came back with a few dishes, Su Wan was still in a daze. "Eat." Chi Mu put the food on the dining table in front of Su Wan. 2 fragrant stir-fried dishes were still steaming. Su Wan smelled the aroma of the food and came back to her senses. She saw Chi Mu standing at the side, the cuffs of his shirt were casually rolled up and there was a faint smell of smoke from the kitchen on his body. "You made it." Su Wan looked at Chi Mu with some surprise and disbelief. Chi Mu smiled, revealing 8 white teeth. "It's been a long time since I personally cooked. Have a taste and see if it's delicious. I was afraid that you'd be too hungry, so I simply fried 2 dishes that are easy to cook." As he spoke, Chi Mu attentively helped Su Wan scoop the rice and took the chopsticks. Su Wan hesitated and took a bite. The taste was surprisingly delicious. "I really didn't expect that you would actually cook." Su Wan put down the chopsticks and looked at Chi Mu with flickering eyes. "Coming out of the living room and working in the kitchen. This is the model of a good man. A man who can't cook is not a good husband." Chi Mu said while attentively adding food to Su Wan. "You eat more. Only when you're full will we have the strength to deal with them." Su Wan smiled and softly said to herself, "I found out that this person, is actually really not bad." "What did you say?" The smile on the corner of Su Wan's mouth had yet to disperse when Chi Mu was caught off guard and moved closer. His cheek was almost sticking to her face. The 2 people's breaths intertwined and Su Wan's face turned red. "You. Why are you leaning so close?" She panicked and wanted to turn around. As a result, because she was sitting on a chair, her center of gravity was unstable and she fell along with the chair. Xiao Wan. Chi Mu's hands were swift and almost instantly pulled Su Wan. Then, Chi Mu hugged Su Wan and fell to the ground. Fortunately, he had been protecting Su Wan in his arms, so Su Wan was not injured. Chi Mu. When he fell down, because Chi Mu hit the corner of the chair, the wound on his arm split open and bled a lot. Her fingers touched those bright red and warm bloodstains and Su Wan immediately became anxious. She turned over and sat on the side and anxiously called Chi Mu's name. Chi Mu, what happened to you? Wake up. Wake up. Unknowingly, Su Wan's eyes reddened and drops of hot tears fell on Chi Mu's face. Chi Mu, who had kept his eyes closed without any reaction, finally slowly opened his eyes. Xiao Wan, do you love me? Chi Mu looked at Su Wan's reddened eyes. On one hand, he strenuously lifted his hand to wipe away the tears on her face. On the other hand, he eagerly looked at her, hoping to get an affirmative answer from her. Love. Even if it was just a little. Su Wan's expression was somewhat at a loss. She stared blankly for a moment and then dared to look straight into Chi Mu's eyes. Chi Mu, then do you love me? Why are you so good to me? She didn't remember having any close contact with him. The two of them only met twice. The trip before the accident was also their first meaningful chat. Su Wan couldn't figure out the reason why Chi Mu did this. Love at first sight? That was absolutely impossible. Meng Ting Yarrow, that kind of girl, was the object of men's love at first sight. Although Su Wan was confident in her looks, she wasn't narcissistic enough to think that Chi Mu would fall in love with her at first sight. Then, in the end, why? Actually, this wasn't the first dream we experienced. Of course, it wasn't the last one either. Chi Mu's gaze was somewhat complicated. He still looked at Su Wan and the tenderness in his eyes was not fake. Actually, you and I, we have experienced several different dreams. Xiao Wan, you saved my life. We once went through life and death together, but in the end, in order to save me, you died. As if recalling the most painful experience, Chi Mu's face slightly distorted. In every dream, the person who survives in the end will obtain different abilities and different rewards. I used all my rewards to exchange for this opportunity to return to the past. The time is only 72 hours. Speaking up to here, Chi Mu raised his hand, his palm facing upwards. Su Wan clearly saw that there was an imprint similar to a dial on his palm, constantly counting down. The time in their spacetime stopped at 3 o'clock in the morning, but the time in Chi Mu's palm was not limited by this space and still kept rotating. Su Wan was already stunned in place. She was unable to accept such a complicated and strange truth for a while. Chi Mu. Su Wan lowered her eyes and looked at Chi Mu with a complicated gaze. After hesitating for a long time, she finally extended her hand towards Chi Mu. Chi Mu smiled and raised his hand to hold Su Wan's slender little hand. He let Su Wan use her strength to help him stand up. Right at this time, the door of the private room was suddenly knocked open by someone. A figure stumbled and rushed in, followed by a strong smell of blood. Fan Shu-jun. Su Wan looked at Fan Shu-jun, who suddenly appeared at the door in horror. His whole body was covered in blood and his eyes were red. Practically without any pause, he brandished the long knife in his hand and stabbed towards Chi Mu. Chi Mu, be careful. At the same time, Su Wan was frightened, her body subconsciously blocked in front of Chi Mu. Almost at the moment of life and death, Fan Shu-jun's movements suddenly paused. Chi Mu took the opportunity to lift his leg and sweep away Fan Shu-jun's weapon. And at the same time, Chi Mu turned around and tightly held Su Wan in his arms. This was the first time the two people were so close, so intimate. Xiao Wan, no. Chi Mu's body suddenly froze. He looked at Su Wan in his arms in disbelief. Su Wan's face was still leaning against Chi Mu's chest, as if she was listening to his heartbeat. There's no heartbeat. The soft female voice carried a trace of careless laughter. Su Wan raised her face and met Chi Mu's gradually slackening eyes. I won. She raised her most elegant smile and announced her final victory. At this time, the two people were still tightly hugging each other, but the miniature Mitsubishi bayonet in Su-wan's hand had already mercilessly pierced Chi-mu's heart, absorbing his heartblood little by little. How could this be? Chi-mu moved his lips as if he wanted to say something, but Su-wan made a shushing gesture at him. Goodbye, Mr. Nightmare. No, maybe I should call you. Su-wan tiptoed and slowly approached Chi-mu's ear, saying word by word, Dreamer, Chi-yu. Chi-mu's consciousness gradually blurred. Although he was very unwilling, he still slowly closed his eyes. His whole body instantly turned into starlight and disappeared. Lost time-space, Plane Restorer Headquarters, Executor Connection Warehouse No. 3. Chi-yu slowly opened his eyes. There was no careless smile on his face as usual. At this moment, his face was strangely unsightly. The first time he confronted No. 3 over there, he was actually defeated. Moreover, it was in the dream space that he was the best at. This was not scientific. You lost, right? At this time, a familiar voice suddenly rang in Chi-yu's ears. Chi-yu looked up and saw his old rival, Yun Sheng, smiling as he leaned against the door of the execution room. It was very clear that this fellow specially rushed over to mock him. People make mistakes and horses stumble. What does this count as? Chi-yu pretended to raise his eyebrows in disdain. Yun Sheng, who was at the door, smiled. CEGE has already warned you many times. Don't provoke No. 3 over there. You just didn't listen. Now do you know how powerful she is? Powerful? Chi-yu's face stiffened. That woman. Until now, Chi-yu still didn't understand. It was clearly in his own dream space. Everything was under his control and surveillance. How did that woman disguise herself and didn't reveal the slightest flaw? This was not realistic. Among all the mission enforcers that Chi-yu knew, other than their number one Shu Ce, no one could disguise themselves so flawlessly in front of him, the dreamer. Don't tell me that woman also has that thing like CEGE? No, absolutely impossible. Chi-yu denied his own guess, but his heart became more and more confused. Seeing him racking his brains, Yun Sheng on the side seemed to be somewhat unable to bear it. He sighed and faintly said, I have been at CEGE's side for the longest time, so there are some things that I know that others don't. Regarding No. 3 over there, in fact, she and CEGE used to be. Yun Sheng's words hadn't finished when he was suddenly interrupted by a commotion. It's rising again, rising again. The point list has changed again. That newcomer actually directly rushed into the top 10. Is he really a madman? Your mother, I have never seen such a crazy newcomer. How can we old people endure? The commotion became more and more ear-piercing. At this time, Chi-yu had already walked to the door and curiously looked at the point list floating in the air not far away. What happened? Seeing his blank expression, Yun Sheng forgot the topic just now and turned to Chi-yu with a gloating smile. Oh, that's right, I almost forgot to tell you. During the time you were doing missions, CEGE received an incredible newcomer from a collapsed plane. That guy's perception is off the charts, his martial strength is off the charts, and even his IQ completely surpasses mortals. TSK, this newcomer is especially vigorous. Usually, he doesn't put CEGE in his eyes, doing missions like crazy. Now, he has already become our department's upstart. Perhaps one day he will replace your position. So crazy. Chi-yu couldn't help but be speechless. A newcomer directly rushed into the top 10? How many missions did he do in the end? Is this still a person? Chi-yu didn't dare to imagine what kind of existence this person was. This kind of speed would break CEG's record for many years, right? For a moment, Chi-yu also forgot the worry of being defeated. On the contrary, he looked at Yun Sheng in high spirits. Is that newcomer still doing missions? I really want to meet him. What's his name? Su Rui. Yun Sheng coldly spat out a name. To be honest, regarding Su Rui's character, Yun Sheng really didn't like it. Su Rui. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.